Good morning. It's my great pleasure to be the one to welcome you to the DC Public Library for this important discussion today on the FCC's National Broadband Plan for Accessibility. I'm Nancy Davenport, and I'm the Director of Library Services for this public library. And standing in the back in red is our Chief Librarian, Jenny Cooper. And she joins me in welcoming all of you to this building and the opportunity to talk to you for just a little bit about what we do with broadband and with technology and for the accessibility community. Technology for us is both a way that we actually deliver a particular service. We deliver access to technology, and it's the way that more and more we deliver library services. You will find that any library that you would go into is a very heavy user of technology and is very often the first place that any resident is going to stop to get access to technology. For us, we have public access computers in every one of our buildings. You'll see the quick 15-minute computers lined up here, and you will see people using them all during the day once we open. We also have them in other parts of this building, and we have them in every one of our libraries. And they're a very important part of bridging that digital divide. And the divide, while it is severe because of economics in this city, it's also severe everywhere because of accessibility issues. And what you are talking about today is closing another gap. So we wanted you to know that we are your partner in all of this, and we want you to know how welcome you are to come to the public library at any time or to request services of us. Many of you know, and I imagine the rest of you have met this morning, for Venetia Dempson, who's Chief of Adaptive Services here. She and her staff are the ones who orchestrate all of this, who were here late at night, last night, and early this morning to make sure that everything was perfect for you. But that's the way they work every day, because every one of their clients is important, and every one of their clients needs their services. We meet many of our clients at the front door as they get off of a bus. We escort them through the library, and when they are finished, we escort them back out for their own safety. We also offer technology seminars for families, because families who suddenly have a close loved one who now needs accessibility services needs to know how to navigate through that community, how to look at the various tools that are available, and to choose the one that's the right price point as well as the right fit for their family member. We offer those kinds of technology seminars in our division on Saturday mornings explicitly for families to come in and be able to shop and make intelligent decisions. So the fact that public libraries are built for public engagement is exactly the reason you should be here. And it's the reason that we welcome you so warmly and hope that you have a good and productive day. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Nancy, and thank you to the Adaptive Services Division for all your hard work in making this event possible and also making the event available to us for today. My name is Dale Hatfield, and I'm the Executive Director of the Silicon Flatiron Center in Boulder, Colorado. The center, along with the American Association of People with Disabilities and the Information Technology and Innovation Foundation, is a co-sponsor of this conference, which is entitled the National Broadband Plan and Accessibility for People with Disabilities. As I'm sure that everyone gathered here this morning knows, the Federal Communications Commission was tasked with creating a national broadband plan under the Recovery Act of 2009. Over the past year, the FCC has been working diligently to develop a plan that will fill the congressional vision that all people of the United States, including people with disabilities, have access to broadband facilities and services. All of that hard work is about to bear fruit because, as you know, just a week from today, the National Broadband Plan will be released. The purpose of our conference today is to bring together government officials, consumers with disabilities, representatives of industry groups, and academics to learn more about the National Broadband Plan, to gather initial reactions to the recommendations contained therein, and to discuss next steps following the release of the plan. Our morning will be divided into two parts. First, we will hear from senior government officials about the plan, and I'll return to those introductions in just a moment. Second, after a brief networking break, we will hear from a panel of experts drawn from consumer groups, industry, and academia. The panel will be co-chaired by Jennifer Simpson, who is the Senior Director of Public Affairs at our co-sponsor, the AAPD, and by Rob Atkinson, who is president of our other co-sponsor, ITIF. Before I go any further, again, I want to thank the people here at the library for making the space available to us and being so helpful in getting things set up. With that, I'd like now to turn to the first part of the program, where it's my distinct honor and privilege to introduce to you the Honorable Julius Janikowski, Chairman of the Federal Communications Commission. Speaking personally, I have been thrilled with the openness, transparency, and data-driven approach that has characterized Chairman Janikowski's efforts to develop the National Broadband Plan, and by the efforts of the agency's broadband team in focusing on the topic of this morning's conference, broadband access for people with disabilities. Please join me in welcoming Julius Janikowski, Chairman of the Federal Communications Commission.
Dale, thank you very, very much. On my first day as FCC chairman, I gave a speech, which may have set a precedent I now regret, but in any event, I did. And I mentioned 3 people in that speech. 2 were my mother and father, and the third was Dale Hatfield, who was an incredible inspiration to me when I was at the FCC 15 years ago, and taught me so much about the facts and the opportunity of technologies. And so it's a privilege to be introduced by one of the greatest people in the sector, Dale Hatfield. It's also a real pleasure to be giving these remarks and having this hearing on people with disabilities and broadband here at a library. I thank Ginny Cooper and Nancy Davenport for making the facilities available for this. I can't imagine that there isn't a person in the room who doesn't have important memories of learning important things in their local public library. I certainly did as a kid growing up, and while libraries are not something that I'll be focusing on in my remarks today, I will tell you that the broadband plan does focus on them, and we understand that libraries will be an important part of the solution to some of the major gaps around broadband, and in fact, we're setting a goal in the plan of 1 gigabit of speed, broadband speed, to every community in the country at an anchor institution like a library or a school or a healthcare facility at a minimum. We look forward to finding ways to work with library associations to have that develop and to see libraries flower as great community centers in a broadband world. Let me acknowledge the incredible panel that we have here today. This is going to be a terrific discussion. I want to thank and welcome Kareem Dale from the White House, who will be speaking today. I don't know if he's here yet, but he's a fighter every day in the White House. Oh, there. Hi, Kareem. He's a fighter every day for disabilities issues and other issues in the White House, and we're very lucky to have him there. And to the FCC staff, who has worked so hard on the broadband plan, so hard on the gaps that were mentioned earlier, so hard on issues around libraries, and especially around issues involving Americans with disabilities. I thank each of you, and in fact, many of the people who have worked so hard on this are here today, and I wanted to actually ask each of you to stand up for a minute and be acknowledged by the crowd for your work. So everyone who's here from the FCC, I see John and Elizabeth, Joel, many others. Thank you very much. I learned something very important about technology from my parents. When I was in high school, my dad took me on a college trip. I was about as old as my oldest son is now. I have an 18-year-old. My father took me to the school that he went to. He took me to MIT, where he was a grad student, took me into the stacks on a trip there, and he showed me engineering plans he had drafted as a graduate student. Old, dusty engineering plans. I don't think they look like that anymore. In any event, they were for a device designed to someday help blind people read words on paper by translating text into physical signals. The formulas and drawings didn't make much sense to me, but the core lesson has remained with me. Communications technology has the power to transform lives for the better. I'm very pleased to say that in the broadband plan that we've been working on, we embrace that principle, the principle that technology can transform lives for the better. As many of you know, at this point, in the Recovery Act, Congress and the President charged the Commission with developing a strategy to bring high-speed internet and its benefits to all Americans. We'll be delivering that plan in 6 days. Broadband is our generation's major infrastructure challenge. It's like roads, canals, railroads, and telephones for previous generations. It's like electricity, I think, in its transformative power. Broadband is a key 21st century platform for opportunity, job creation, economic growth. Studies from Brookings, MIT, the World Bank, and others all tell us the same thing, that even modest increases in broadband adoption can yield hundreds of thousands of new jobs. As we rebuild our economy, we must seize the opportunities and tackle the challenges of 21st century communications. Broadband is a platform for innovation, allowing anyone, anywhere to dream big and bring those dreams to life, so long as they're meaningfully connected to the internet. Broadband is also a platform for solutions to many of our country's most pressing challenges, whether it's education, healthcare, energy, public safety. Few populations stand to benefit more from broadband than the millions of Americans with disabilities. Broadband has the potential to bridge gaps and provide opportunities that were inconceivable in the past. Broadband allows people with disabilities to live independent lives in their communities of choice. If you have broadband, you can telecommute or run a business out of your home, receive remote health and job-related support, gain access to online educational classes or digital books. Broadband holds tremendous potential for people with disabilities to communicate and connect with others, to engage as part of our national civic discussion, as online forums are becoming the town halls of the 21st century. Broadband can make our government more accessible. Our proceeding to develop the National Broadband Plan, in fact, has itself emphasized accessibility. It included over 40 public workshops, and it did it in a way that allowed maximum participation from the broadest possible audience. We streamed our forums and our workshops and our hearings live. We included closed caption streaming of the events. We allowed people to submit questions online, and many, many have. Now, unfortunately, the promise of broadband for the 54 million Americans with disabilities is falling short of the reality. A couple of weeks ago, we released a paper on broadband adoption and use in America. Our survey showed that only 42% of people with disabilities use broadband at home, compared to 65% nationwide. An astounding 39% of all non-adopters have a disability. Now, the costs of digital exclusion are great and getting greater. In the 21st century, high-speed internet is essential to an individual's ability to participate in our economy and our democracy. Rather than closing the opportunity gap for people with disabilities, the internet has the potential to exacerbate inequality if we do nothing. This is not acceptable, and we have a congressional mandate to take action to ensure that people with disabilities are not left behind. Historically, it's taken years, even decades, for people with disabilities to gain anything close to equal access to communications. This has been true for wireline telephones, televisions, digital cell phones, other devices. Designers of equipment, services, and networks, perhaps understandably, but nevertheless, have too often neglected to consider accessibility issues in the design and development stage of their products. And then retrofit solutions are expensive and take a long time. This was the story with fixes that had to be made to digital wireless technologies to make them compatible with TTYs and hearing aids. With broadband, we have the opportunity to consider accessibility issues relatively early in the deployment process and enable people with disabilities to share fully in the benefits of broadband. Now, in order to realize broadband's potential for people with disabilities, we must address the barriers. Devices, services, software, and content are often not accessible to people with disabilities. Assistive technologies are sometimes very expensive, not interoperable with the latest technologies, or difficult to find and repair. People with disabilities also often don't get the training and support they need to use broadband technologies and services. Industry, innovation, and collaborative efforts have tremendous potential to help close the gaps for people with disabilities. In the last year, we've seen the introduction of Apple's smartphone that contains a built-in screen reader and captioning capabilities. Windows 7 supports a number of accessibility features such as speech recognition, a magnifying window, an on-screen keyboard, and a screen reader. AT&T and AOL have teamed up to provide a real-time IM relay service. Google developed technologies which allow it to use voice recognition software to automatically caption videos on its YouTube site. And last week it announced that it would offer captions for all videos on the site. Disney and ABC made a very important announcement in this respect that I'll come back to in a few minutes. We have a unique opportunity to build on these positive developments with the National Broadband Plan we'll release next week. The plan's recommendations on how to expand the reach and depth of broadband's benefits to people with disabilities are guided by 4 principles: enhancing coordination, improving enforcement and implementation, using data wisely, and updating our policies for the 21st century. Let me summarize some of what the Broadband Plan will recommend. First, the plan will recommend the formation of an interagency working group to coordinate policies that promote broadband adoption by people with disabilities. This group will help ensure that government leads by example when it comes to accessibility policy. It will help coordinate a government-wide assessment to make sure every federal agency is complying with requirements that federal information and communications technologies be accessible. This review should extend from websites that are used by the public to IT equipment purchased for agency use. All should be accessible. The working group can also apply a common sense test to existing policies to make sure they advance the broader objectives of promoting innovative, affordable accessibility solutions. Consider Medicare, which will pay for a piece of durable medical equipment, and that's in quotes, such as an augmentative and alternative communication device that costs $8,000, but not a $300 smartphone that can run $150 text-to-speech software that works more effectively and efficiently than the $8,000 device. We need to look at issues like that. The working group can look at issues like that and at ways to lower the cost of assistive technologies to ensure that they're keeping pace with other technological breakthroughs. For example, the group can explore efforts to use cloud computing and other platforms to allow people to access the assistive technologies they need anytime, anywhere, and on any device. Second, the plan will recommend establishing an ongoing accessibility and innovation forum, which will promote the use of collaborative problem-solving processes among a diverse group of stakeholders. The forum will allow industry, consumers, academics, researchers, students, assistive technology vendors, third-party application developers, and others to share best practices and new innovations and to learn from consumers about their needs. The forum will hold workshops on a regular basis, both here in DC and out in the field. Some possible topics include industry best practices, cloud computing, wireless devices and applications, assistive technologies, digital literacy. The forum will have an online presence, and we intend to present an annual Chairman's Award for Accessibility and Innovation to spur competition and to set goals for accomplishment. Third, the plan will recommend that the FCC, Congress, and the Justice Department update accessibility laws and policies and ensure that they are enforced. I believe that legislation introduced by Congressman Ed Markey, the 21st Century Communications and Video Accessibility Act, should be a starting point for legislative discussions to achieve many of these updates. To address barriers to services and equipment, the plan will recommend updating the Section 255 Telecom Accessibility Rules and Hearing Aid Compatibility Rules. To address content barriers, the plan will recommend opening a proceeding on the technical issues relating to captioning and video description of programming on the Internet and the devices that are used to watch programming. The plan will also recommend that DOJ determine the applicability of the ADA to commercial websites. To address affordability barriers, the plan will recommend that there be federal support for those who cannot afford assistive technologies and who do not have access to assistive technologies through existing programs. And to spur a broad range of innovative accessibility solutions, the plan will recommend that Congress give the FCC authority under the Universal Service Fund to provide up to $10 million a year to provide competitively based funding to developers of innovative devices, components, software applications, or other assistive technologies that promote accessibility. Our proceedings for the National Broadband Plan are already having an impact, I'm pleased to say. Many of you may have attended the FCC's field hearing in November at Gallaudet and heard Marlee Matlin's forceful remarks about the lack of captioning on the internet. One of her many examples was that she could not watch herself on Dancing with the Stars on ABC. Well, I'm happy to report that some folks were listening, some folks who may be in the audience today, and Disney and ABC took action. The company committed to captioning all of its long-form programs that it puts on its online player at abc.com, including reality and live shows like Dancing with the Stars. It was a major step, and we appreciate it. We've also found that new media tools have allowed us to tap into perspectives and new sources of information that would have been unimaginable and unreachable in the past. This is through our commitment to opening up all of our proceedings to anyone wherever they are and whether or not they have disabilities. Let me read you the words of Sandra Lee Smith 46, posted on broadband.gov a couple of months ago. It's a long quote, but it has a lot of meaning to a lot of us, and I'm going to read it in full. Quote, "I am a disabled citizen on a very tight budget." Again, this is an online comment we received as part of our proceeding. "I am a disabled citizen on a very tight budget. I have this computer as a gift from my sister, and I currently have wireless internet access as part of my rent at the RV park where I live. I have difficulty getting out and doing many things physically to shop, bank, and the like. Before going online, I rarely socialized because the physical effort to get there to do so was just too great. With the internet, I can do so with little energy output and enjoy doing so. Believe it or not, that is a big deal." Unquote. We as a society must believe Sandra Lee Smith 46 when she tells us that having access to broadband is a big deal. We must embrace the cause and understand that if 39% of non-adopters have a disability, we will not close the adoption gap until we address the barriers faced by people with disabilities. We must make clear that building in accessibility at the design and development stage is cost-effective, and that all of society benefits from the widespread use of accessibility features such as captioning, speech recognition, and speech output. Delivering on the promise of equal access to the broadband infrastructure will require ongoing commitment and resources from both the public and private sectors. Our solutions must build from existing efforts both in industry and in government, but our solutions must also tap new sources of information and innovation and utilize the tools of new media and open government. Now is the time to engage in this endeavor in earnest and show that we all do indeed believe that this is a big deal for people with disabilities and for all Americans. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mr. Chairman, for those wonderful and inspiring remarks. It is now my honor and privilege to introduce to you Kareem Dale, Special Assistant to President Obama for Disability Policy. In that role, Mr. Dale coordinates the administration's efforts to see that people with disabilities are on a level playing field with all Americans. Mr. Dale previously served as a National Disability Director for the Obama for America campaign. Please join with me in welcoming Kareem Dale, Special Assistant to the President for Disability Policy. To your right. Yeah. Put it right there. Okay.
Thank you very much, Dale, for that nice introduction. And thank you to Chairman Janikowski and the FCC for inviting me to join you all here today. For me, I think it's a simple idea. And my role here today is to talk to you a little bit about technology and accessibility and what the administration and the White House are doing and hoping to achieve regarding technology and accessibility. And for me, it comes down to this. Accessibility equals independence. And I think it's just as simple as that. No matter what you're talking about, whether you're talking about reading, whether you're talking about education, whether you're talking about living, employment, entertainment, or just living in your own home, or a computer. It really comes down to accessibility equals independence. And, you know, I walk around, I go around to D.C. and around the country, and I give a lot of speeches, and I talk different things. You know, sometimes it's a policy-focused speech. Sometimes it's a motivational type of speech. But I thought today that I would give you some personal anecdotes and talk to you a little bit about personally what's going on with me and with the administration about technology to kind of help drive home this point that accessibility equals independence, and I hope will demonstrate our commitment. But let me start by saying that I think it's fitting that we're here in the library for this event, just like the chairman pointed out, because one of the first places I visited when I moved to D.C. back in November of 2008, I guess that was now. Wow, seems like a long time ago. Back in November of 2008, shortly after the president won the election and I moved down here to work on the transition team, this was one of the first places I visited because I am an avid reader for entertainment purposes. And so I wanted to connect with the Library for the Blind and figure out, you know, and get registered and get my my portfolio that says what I've read and get some equipment and just get connected with this Library for the Blind. And so I worked with the team here, with Venetia and her team, and they've been outstanding. And to be able to access and come to a library and be able to make sure I can get books and read independently is of enormous benefit. And it's even more important when somebody with a disability, as in my case, is moving across the country. And you need to get established. And it really, really is important. And this library has been phenomenal. And so I thank the library and their staff because that is critical. And that's a critical part to adjusting to a new community. You have this wonderful library here right in the middle of Northwest D.C. That is open, that is accessible, and that is willing to assist so that everybody can enjoy reading. And I visited with them for their book reading program on Saturday morning where I read Braille with the children, and I didn't quite read as well as the children, so I need to practice up a little bit. But it's an astonishingly wonderful program. But moving on to technology more broadly. As I said, I wanted to talk to you a little bit about personally what's going on. When I started at the White House, obviously this administration has been leading the charge for technology and computers and broadband and updated accessibility or updated technology. And it was very important, obviously. We move at a pretty fast pace at the White House, and so it was important that the technology be accessible so that I could be on the same playing field with my peers and communicate with them in the same time frame and just as rapidly as they need to communicate with me. And so when I started, they use Blackberries, have computers, and it was a decision early on to figure out how are we going to make sure that I have enough accessible technology and accessible equipment. And as we started to get adjusted, I started in the administration officially on March 2nd. And we started to look at these issues, and I started to say, you know, there's got to be a way. I've got to make sure that I can use a BlackBerry. It's got to be accessible. There's no way I cannot be able to communicate with my BlackBerry when I'm in meetings for 4 hours and I come back and I've got 100 emails. I've got to be able to, just like everybody else, check their BlackBerry on the run. I've got to be able to know who's calling me on the phone. I've got to make sure that my computer is working properly and is fully usable and does not, you know, shut down or have potential issues with the security that we have at the White House. And I think what we learned early on and what the White House committed to very quickly and understood that this was a priority and that this was important. And not everybody there was familiar with accessibility or knew a lot about accessibility or understood the various issues. But what became clear was that they were going to have to learn. And what they said was that we're not only willing to learn, we absolutely need to and must learn, because this is not about just me. It's about making sure that for the future, as we move forward, that there are things in place so that the next people with disabilities that work at the White House will make sure that they have accessible technology, so that all of the government agencies can see what the White House is doing on technology. And so what the White House did was set up a full Kareem Dale accessibility team. That's what I call them. That's not what they call themselves, by the way. That's what I've named them. Team Dale is what I call them. And there are essentially, there are basically 3 people on the team. One of our heads of technology oversees the team. There's another young woman on the team who is responsible for overall providing daily or weekly reports as to what are the issues surrounding technology that I'm facing. And then there's a tech person who's responsible for kind of installing my equipment, adjusting it, making sure there are any problems. So he had to sit down and learn Windows and learn other talking software so that he would be familiar and knew how to adjust it, install it, ask questions, get technical support when it was needed. And so that was the beginning of this process of making sure that I had full accessibility. And what has resulted from that is that I now have fully working, capable computer that is fully accessible with all of our myriad of security procedures at the White House and security software. I have a full and capable working, I guess, what do you call it? You would call it a mobile device, I guess is what you would call it. You call it a mobile device where I can read my email. And we were able to work with BlackBerry to get BlackBerry Connect software so that I could use and respond to email just like everybody else in a timely fashion. I also have a talking caller ID on my phone so that I know when any of you all call me, and I can, you know, make sure I answer the phone when you call. Because when I see your number, you know I always pick up. So that's really helpful to know who's calling so I can make sure to pick up the phone when you all call. But it has been an extraordinary experience. And what I have done is talk to some of our other agencies. We did it last year during Disability Employment Awareness Month, where we went around and talked to the agencies about what we were doing at the White House and encouraged them to make sure that people with disabilities in their agencies, that we're working hard and finding solutions, finding mechanisms to figure out how to make sure that people can have accessible technology so that they can not only do their jobs, not only perform in their jobs, but perform at top peak performance. And so that has been an extraordinary experience for me to have all of this working technology and to have a team dedicated to figuring out how do we make sure we have accessible technology at the White House. And I think that that personal experience for me has solidified and motivated at the same time me to make sure that we are working hard on accessible technology. I think that you are going to be very pleased over the next months and years to come with some of the efforts that we have underway in the administration related to accessible technology. Whether it be 508, whether it be working with the chief information officers, whether it be websites and captioning and all of the things that go with that, we are working very hard to make sure and to improve accessibility for the White House, but also for the administration. I'm proud to say that after a lot of work, we now provide closed captioning on our live White House web chats, which has been a process in the making to figure out how to make sure we get live captioning, because we had to revamp the entire network at the White House, the computer network, and we now have live captions. And we also, of course, caption any of our speeches that we put up on the White House website. And that has been an extraordinary thing. And one of the first times we did it was it was an event with the president. I think it was one of his healthcare speeches, his primetime. I think it was one of his primetime healthcare speeches, and it did in fact overload the system. And we learned from that, and we've adjusted accordingly to figure out a way to live caption events that, like that event, had millions and millions of people logging on, and it kind of overloaded the system. But we are working hard to continue to improve and figure out ways to make sure that our events, that our technology, and our communications with you, the public, are fully accessible. And so I look forward to continuing to work with each and every one of you in industry, in government, the not-for-profit, the community activists, to figure out how we make sure that each and every person with a disability has the ability to communicate effectively using accessible technology, because accessibility equals independence. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Dale, for those wonderful words on behalf of the administration. And of course, as an engineer, I was fascinated by your description of the what you're doing in terms of accessible technology at the White House. With that great background, we'll now turn to two senior officials from the FCC who will provide us with more detailed information about the Omnibus Broadband Initiative, the associated working paper, and the steps toward implementation of the plan. To do that, it's again my honor and privilege to introduce to you Joel Gurin and Elizabeth Lyle. Before doing so, I should mention too that we have much more detailed bios in the program itself, which you can look at, and I'm just going to briefly summarize them. Joel is the chief of the Consumer and Government Affairs Bureau at the FCC. The Bureau's responsibilities include developing policies related to consumer affairs issues, working with state, local, and tribal governments, communicating with the public about the FCC's activities, facilitating public participation in the FCC's decision-making process, handling consumer inquiries and complaints, and of course, of particular relevance to this conference, ensuring access to communications technologies for people with disabilities. Elizabeth is currently serving as a policy advisor to the Omnibus Broadband Initiative and is managing the broadband team's disability access work. Elizabeth has been at the FCC since 1996, and I first met her when we were both working on disability access issues under former FCC Chairman Bill Kennard. Speaking personally, Elizabeth is one of my real heroes for her tireless efforts over the years in the disability access area. We're indeed fortunate to have both Joel and Elizabeth with us this morning, and they have agreed to take some questions at the end of their remarks. What we've done is we've arranged for some white cards to be circulated around the room while they speak. And if you have a question you'd like to have answered, if you'll jot it down, we'll have people then circulating to bring the cards forward. If you need help in filling out those cards, we can do that as well. So with that, I'd like you all to welcome Joel and Elizabeth Lyle to talk in more detail about the broadband plan.
Well, thank you very much. It's really a pleasure to be here and to see such a wonderful turnout for this very important event. Thank you, Dale and Silicon Flatirons, for sponsoring this event, to AAPD and ITIF for co-sponsoring, and to the Martin Luther King Jr. Library for hosting. I am new to the FCC. I've just joined at the end of, in December, as the head of Consumer and Governmental Affairs Bureau. And my background, among other things, is that I spent 15 years at Consumer Reports and their publisher, Consumers Union. And at Consumers Union, our mission, as we said it, was always to work for a fair, just, and safe marketplace for all consumers, and to empower consumers to protect themselves. And that is very much the mission of our bureau, CGB, the Consumer and Governmental Affairs Bureau, and that commitment to all consumers is very much why we're here today. We are going to have, as a bureau, a significant role in implementing the accessibility recommendations of the National Broadband Plan, and have been working very closely with Elizabeth on this as well. There's a lot of work for us to do. We're going to talk about some of the next steps, both for the FCC generally and the Consumer Bureau, and would love to get your input and feedback today. But I'm going to start by asking Elizabeth to talk about the recommendations in the National Broadband Plan, and also a working paper that will go with the plan on accessibility, and then I'll talk a bit more about what we're doing in the Consumer Bureau as well. So, Elizabeth.
Great. Thanks, Joel. It's been terrific working with you and all the people in your bureau and from the Disability Rights Office throughout this process. And we've actually had support from virtually every bureau and office through the FCC. It's been a real team effort. And thank you for Dale. You're a hero to me, too. And to Jennifer and Rob and the staff from the DC Public Library. And it's just great to see all of you here today. But I think most of all who I want to thank is all the stakeholders for their remarkable contributions to the record. You've participated in our town hall meeting, our all-day workshop, our field hearing. You followed comments in response to the NOI, our blog, and of course that seemingly never-ending stream of National Broadband Plan public notices that we put out. Thank you. The record has just been really important and terrific to us. We've learned a lot from you, and our plan reflects your efforts. And the forthcoming National Broadband Plan Accessibility Working Paper, which will be released shortly after the plan, will reflect your contributions as well. The paper will provide a context and analysis for the recommendations that we're going to discuss today. And specifically, it's going to describe the barriers faced by many groups within the disability community. We heard from so many different people from different communities that we've never even seen at the FCC before, as well as those that we've been working with for years. We've learned so much from people with vision and hearing and speech, and those who are deaf-blind, those with upper and lower mobilities and intellectual disabilities and autism. And it really was a terrific record. And we will also, the paper will also look at the ongoing efforts and innovations from industry and the collaborative efforts. And I wish I could spend a little more time today talking about them and how they've shaped our recommendations. But they're really critical, such as all the new innovative software applications and all the ongoing collaborative efforts, such as, we have Axel Lebois from GC ICT here today, for example, and there are just many that are too numerous to mention. But the working paper will discuss it. And then the working paper will also discuss, despite all these terrific ongoing efforts, there are lots of gaps and things that we need to do if we're going to accelerate the adoption rate for people with disabilities. And so the paper looks at those gaps and has specific recommendations to address them. But for now, I think what I'd like to do is go through some of the recommendations that the chairman has hit upon in a little more detail. And then Joe will be talking about the implementation efforts, and then we'll be happy to answer any questions that you might have. First of all, I'd like to emphasize that our approach was to integrate consideration of disability issues throughout the plan. As discussed at yesterday's digital inclusion event at the museum, some of the key barriers that all Americans face to broadband are cost, lack of digital skills, and the lack of relevant content. And people with disabilities will benefit from the broadly based solutions that the plan outlines to address these barriers. In many cases, specific disability access components are part of these broader-based recommendations. People with disabilities, for example, will benefit from the plan's efforts to make broadband affordable for low-income Americans, such as the plan's recommendation to expand the Universal Service Fund's Lifeline and LEAK-UP telephone support programs to include broadband. The plan also recommends the establishment of a digital literacy corps to teach digital literacy skills. The program will be designed to ensure that people with disabilities are fully included, both in terms of content and in terms of the accessibility of the teaching materials. The plan also recommends the creation of private partnerships that collaborate with federal agencies that serve low-adopting populations. The concept is that private and nonprofit partners will provide discounted hardware and broadband service, as well as relevant software, training, and applications to encourage and enable adoption. Among the agencies cited as an ideal potential collaborator is the Social Security Administration, which reaches 7 million children and adults with disabilities who have little or no income and are served by the SSI program, the Supplemental Security Income Program. And many of these could be helped with a package that meets their particular sets of needs for the disability community. In addition to considering the barriers that all Americans face, though, the plan considers the additional affordability and accessibility barriers faced by people with disabilities and provides recommendations to address these barriers. The plan envisions three umbrellas of recommendations. First, as the chairman mentioned, the creation of a broadband accessibility working group within the executive branch. Second, the establishment of an accessibility and innovation forum at the FCC. And third, specific concrete actions that we can take at the FCC, that the Department of Justice can take, and that Congress can take to address the accessibility and affordability barriers. So just to go to the first one, the Broadband Accessibility Working Group, it'll consist of about 15 agencies with a stake in broadband accessibility issues, and this is the recommendation. And as the chairman said, it would focus on making the government itself a model of accessibility through improved implementation of Section 508. It would also coordinate accessibility policy and spending priorities. One important focus would be to lower the cost of assistive technologies and ensure that assistive technologies can keep pace with and be interoperable with the latest technologies. For example, it should consider a proposal that's in the record that the government should provide funding for a unified network-based delivery system for assistive technologies through cloud computing and other platforms, which would lower the cost of assistive technologies and provide easy-to-use accessibility features for people with disabilities. This is something that's worthy of our consideration and that we would need input from a lot of people and lots of different agencies to consider. I think that, as the chairman would mention, under this proposal, software enhancements to the broadband infrastructure would allow people, in the words of one of the commenters in the record, to call up interface features or adaptations that they need anytime, anywhere, and on any device that they encounter. The working group should also consider how to lower the cost of assistive technologies through new software distribution and licensing models, such as open source software. It should also consider how to incentivize states to distribute information technologies and assistive technologies that relate to IT to people with disabilities, and whether subsidies are needed for assistive technology vendors. Finally, the working group should prepare a report on the state of broadband accessibility in the United States on a biannual basis and within the year after its establishment. The report would collect and analyze information about broadband adoption, barriers, and usage among different subgroups in the disability community and incorporate the results from questions included in the FCC surveys under the Broadband Data Improvement Act. And this This analysis report fundamentally should analyze the root causes of the relatively low broadband adoption rate, looking at different subgroups, and also do assistive technology analysis and try to figure out, where are the gaps in assistive technology coverage, and what programs are covering certain people, but where the gaps still remain. The plan should also recommend that the We believe that this forum is needed to supplement traditional regulatory processes, given the rapid pace of technological development, the diversity of the stakeholders, and the complexity of the problems. We will have ongoing workshops, which Joel will describe in more detail, as well as the chairman said, an annual award for accessibility and innovation. And we're very excited about building an online presence to help facilitate problem solving for our forum, and Joel will also tell us a little bit more about that. Finally, let me just walk through some of the specific recommendations and actions for the FCC, Department of Justice, and Congress that are in the plan. As the chairman mentioned, the 21st Century Communications and Video Accessibility Act, H.R. 3101, is a starting point for many of these recommendations. With respect to services and equipment, to the extent that the FCC can assure itself that it has the jurisdiction to do so, it should extend the Section 255 rules. Specifically, the Commission should require providers of advanced services, so that would include non-interconnected VoIP, because interconnected VoIP is already covered, electronic messaging and video conferencing, and it would also include manufacturers of equipment used for these kinds of advanced services, and that would also, that would include the end-user equipment, network equipment, and software. These requirements on service providers and manufacturers to make their products accessible to people with disabilities. To the extent that the FCC cannot assure itself that it has the jurisdiction to make these extensions, it should seek authority from Congress to do so. The Commission should also extend its hearing aid compatibility rules to all types of devices that provide voice communication via built-in speaker and are typically held to the ear to the extent that it's technologically feasible to do so. If it's really like a phone, we should apply the hearing aid compatibility rules. And we have an ongoing proceeding that we will go forward with. The Commission should also open a proceeding on the need to implement a standard for reliable and interoperable real-time text anytime VoIP is available and supported. And the paper goes into some detail about how the Commission should consider the Access Board's Telecommunications and Electronic and Information Technology Advisory Committee's work as part of the VoIP real-time text proceeding, as well as coordinate its efforts with the next generation E911 efforts that seek to implement a real-time interoperable voice, video, and text E911 system. This is just an issue that we need to engage in and learn more about. And then as part of that, the Commission should also consider how to efficiently transition all current users of TTYs to next generation technologies. With respect to content issues, the plan makes the following recommendations. As the chairman mentioned, the Department of Justice should amend its regulations to clarify the obligations of commercial establishments under Title III of the ADA with respect to commercial websites. The Commission should open a proceeding, and again this tracks the H.R. 31 legislation, should open a proceeding on the accessibility of video programming distributed over the internet, the devices used to display such programming, and related user interfaces, video programming guides, and menus. The inquiry will cover closed captioning decoder and video description capability, and the transmission of emergency information over the internet. And Congress should clarify that the Commission has authority to adopt video description rules. This authority was struck down in the D.C. Circuit decision in 2003. With respect to other issues in the proceeding, the Commission should assess its jurisdiction to make rules in this area. The proceedings should also coordinate with the efforts of the ongoing work of the Society of Motion Picture and Television Engineers to develop technical standards for the construction of captioning information that accompanies video content distributed over broadband networks. With respect to subsidy funds, first, the plan recommends that Congress should authorize the Commission to use universal service funds to provide competitively based funding to developers of innovative devices, components, software applications, or other assistive technologies that promote accessibility. And this funding will be capped at $10 million per year. Second, the plan recommends that government should ensure that those who cannot afford assistive technologies and who do not have access to assistive technologies through existing programs have federal support. As the working paper makes clear, one population that isn't particularly in need is the deaf-blind. The American Association of Deaf-Blind estimates that 4,000 people who do not use broadband now could be online if subsidies were available for Braille displays, which have an average cost of about $5,000. The limited size of the relevant population will keep the funding requirements small, but federal support is essential to provide the deaf-blind community access to communications. Few states are willing to incur the high expenses associated with Braille displays. So accordingly, the plan recommends that Congress should authorize the Commission to establish rules that define as eligible for universal service funds, state, tribal, or other Commission-approved programs that distribute assistive technologies used by the deaf-blind to access advanced communication services, including broadband. And this funding, as is in a similar provision in H.R. 3101, caps the funding at $10 million per year. Furthermore, the plan recommends that as part of its broader reform efforts, the FCC should determine whether to establish a separate subsidy program to fund broadband services and assistive technologies under its telecommunications relay service program. The plan also recommends that the Commission consider whether to include additional IP-enabled TRS services, such as video-assisted speech-to-speech service, which could benefit people with disabilities. The working paper will suggest a few more related recommendations as well, but we'll save those for another day. I can see what the time is. And I just want to thank you again for providing us with such a rich record, and we look forward to working with you on the next steps. And now I'll pass this back to Joel for more talk on implementation.
Great. Thank you. Thanks, Elizabeth. Thank you very much. And Elizabeth, as I'm sure you can tell, is not only has tremendous expertise in this area, but has been a major contributor to the plan that is now going to be rolled out nationally, which is great. I'm going to talk very briefly so that we have time for questions, but I just want to talk a little bit about implementation and what the Consumer Bureau will be doing. So, as many of you know, the Disability Rights Office is part of the Consumer and Governmental Affairs Bureau, so we have the team there that will be doing a lot of the implementation. And we will be responsible for setting up the Accessibility and Innovation Forum that launches in July and that you've been hearing about both from Elizabeth and from our chairman. We're going to be holding a lot of meetings before that event to get your input on the forum and figure out what's the best way to go forward so that this really is effective and collaborative. We want it to be a collaborative, problem-solving forum that really can be a model of new and open government. We plan to reach out to hundreds of people who have already expressed an interest in broadband accessibility in this proceeding. And as the chairman said, we also need to reach out to new sources of ideas and innovation. Researchers, rehabilitation, engineering research centers, tinkerers, technology clinics, law clinics, anybody who wants to work to address accessibility challenges. We really want this to be a very big tent. We're also building a presence online. Our vision is to have an online space where the Commission will be engaged and where people who are facing accessibility problems can meet up with those who can work to solve the problems. We're thinking about setting up an online clearinghouse of products that can help make broadband more accessible. We're going to use the tools of new media to communicate regularly on accessibility issues. We plan to provide more information about the complaints we receive and let people know what trends we're seeing. And finally, we will have a blog that tracks other private and public collaborative efforts with updates from people all over the country and all over the world who are working on these issues. So that's a preview of what we will be doing online. In addition, the forum, once it begins, will have ongoing in-person workshops about 4 times a year. Some will be here in Washington, but we also plan to go around the country to centers of innovation. And there's a whole range of topics that we can talk about in these workshops to improve accessibility. We can talk about best practices for accessibility of broadband, the potential for cloud computing and other new platforms, wireless devices and accessibility applications, digital literacy, distance learning, telemedicine, public safety. So we look forward to hearing your thoughts about how we can best work together on this collaborative effort. And finally, at the same time, the Consumer Bureau is going to be working on many of the regulatory recommendations in the plan, where we will have rulemaking procedures where we would like your input as well. Within 2010, we are planning, as you've heard today, to work on extending the Section 255 rules, updating hearing aid compatibility rules, working on VoIP, Voice over Internet Protocol, with the Wireline Bureau, working with the Office of Engineering and Technology to improve the accessibility of video programming, and looking at other issues as well. It's going to be a very full year for us. We look forward to working with you to make it a successful one, and now are happy to take your questions. Thank you very much. How are we doing this? Are we with cards? Or what are we doing? Oh, yes. Okay. Yes. Okay. We have a question there too. So how do we do this?
Yes. Are we done? Okay. I think we're going to have to use cards to make sure that it's fully accessible to everyone, but they'll help you with the card. Is that okay? So then we'll go with the cards, and then we'll take that question as one of the cards. Okay. Will the associated working paper be released with the broadband plan simultaneously? If not, when? Thank you. We're hoping that it will come out at the end of the month is the target. It takes, right now the resources are focused on the printing and everything else of the broadband plan and everything. So it's really kind of a resource issue. So but within, I think by the end of the month, we hope to have it out. So.
We're reviewing the cards here, so just give us a minute. Yes. Do you want to take one of those?
Sure.
Go ahead.
It says, please describe the details involving students with disabilities as it relates to the broadband plan. We hope that by having the broadband accessibility working group, that would involve, one of the key players with this is going to be the Department of Education. And so I think that they're going to be a stakeholder at the table helping us work through issues. The broadband plan itself does not single out students with disabilities as a particular subgroup that we're necessarily focused on, but of course all the recommendations that promote accessibility and with technology would be beneficial to students, and like I said, the Department of Education will be involved with the Broadband Accessibility Working Group.
I have a feeling that Elizabeth will know the better answers to these questions than me, so why don't I do something useful by reading the questions? Okay. Regarding the broadband plan, here's a question. Regarding the broadband plan, will there be the expectation that companies making equipment and other entrepreneurs will step up to the need to further improve accessibility? And a related question from the same person, what will be the impact for carriers like Comcast and other broadband providers, both wired and wireless, or even Google, for devices, access speed, prices, and other factors, and will there be stimulus money to support this? So I guess both these questions together really relate to what's the we're getting many questions now. I'll talk faster. What are the expectations about what industry will do, both carriers and device manufacturers, and is there stimulus funding to help that?
Stimulus funding is not in our jurisdiction, I don't think. So that's, we can't, what the recommendations do is set up, through having the Accessibility and Innovation Forum, a mechanism where industry will be working with all of us and partners to come up with accessibility solutions. And we really try to come up with a plan that would tap into industry's innovation and where we could work together. And so, I think the best thing to do is to let industry and companies innovate and do what they can do to address accessibility issues. And so I think that's how we see tapping into innovation and having the companies and stakeholders work to solve the problems.
Yeah, and I think also to emphasize that we're looking for solutions to come not only from the established carriers and device providers, but from anybody working in a garage who has a good idea. We really want to bring that forward. Next question, what percentage of children and adults on disability live in rural environments, and why couldn't we have the same law as rural electricity of 1936? Well, one thing just to mention is that rural areas in general are also a significant focus of the broadband plan. We know that there's much less broadband availability in rural areas, so the plan does look at how to reach people in those areas overall. Elizabeth, is there anything you would add on this particular point?
Well, just that, and I do think that people with disabilities are disproportionately represented in rural areas, and so it is important to, as we craft rural policies, that could benefit people with disabilities more too.
Great. Let's take this one. They keep coming. You answered that. Have we talked to this yet? Deaf and blind community. Should we take that one? Okay. Another question we have is what initiatives are being developed to improve the quality of services to the deaf and blind community in areas of emergency preparedness, fire, and police services?
There are separate recommendations within the public safety section of the plan that talks about ensuring that emergency services are accessible with people with disabilities. I don't recall that it specifically talks about the deaf-blind community in that context, but it does talk about the importance of ensuring that emergency services and kind of lays out specific ways for moving forward, both with E911 and emergency alert systems.
Yes, and our Bureau, the Consumer Bureau, has been in conversation with representatives of the deaf-blind community and in general want to make sure that we're serving that community well in many ways. Here's one on assistive device technology. Some of these, by the way, we may not have answers to, but I want to share them because they're good questions. So speaking of assistive device technologies that are compatible with broadband, will the FCC support making them available at reasonable cost for those who are not disabled, yet have family members work with or generally interact a lot with people with disabilities? They are usually expensive and funds are available for the disabled, but I guess not for other people who work with them.
I think one of the things we've figured out is there are lots of cross-cutting agency programs and assistive technologies. For example, school boards might, if you're a student with a disability, school districts might pay for your assistive technologies. If you're an employer, you might have an obligation under the ADA to pay for assistive technologies, and we don't know where there are gaps in coverage, and we don't know the most efficient way to fund assistive technologies. The European Union did a report last year in Europe where they looked at some of these issues, but we have not delved into these issues in depth, and I think that's one of the issues that that we recommend for the Broadband Accessibility Working Group to delve into, and then after we have a broader understanding of how all these programs interrelate, we can better make assessments as to how to do the funding.
Great. Thank you. This is one that I'll answer. We have a fairly long question that I'll just try to paraphrase about how the FCC sees its jurisdiction over the Internet and the World Wide Web. That's a fairly complex question, but I think it's sort of beyond the scope of this meeting today. But I do want to just point something out because there may be a little bit of confusion. The FCC has been charged with the responsibility by Congress, along with the NTIA, of developing the National Broadband Plan, but not every recommendation in that plan is a recommendation for action by the FCC. In other words, we're the planners, we're not necessarily the implementers of everything that comes out of the plan. So as you look at the plan, just know that it is not all about actions that we may take, it's also actions that this plan, the planners housed in the FCC believe should be taken by other parts of government and the private sector as well. We have a question about whether we will be represented at the CSUN AT conference in San Diego later this month. Are we going?
Well, we should. I don't know I don't know if anyone's signed up in the FCC, but it is an excellent conference, and so if we're not there physically, we need to coordinate and figure out a way because we understand the importance of the event.
Yes. And then the last question we have here is how would I be able to get inexpensive software? That's a question I ask myself on a regular basis. I'm not sure we quite have an answer to that yet, but one of the things that we are planning to do through the Accessibility Forum, which is going to be an ongoing process, is to set up an online clearinghouse that would include all kinds of products, devices, and I think software as well. So if we don't have the answer to that now, it's certainly part of our plan to develop that.
Oh, and I think there was one other question at the outset about the question about Braille displays, and did we understand that they are used well beyond the deafblind community? And yes, we do understand that, and I'm sorry if my remarks made you lead you to believe that we didn't have that understanding. So thank you.
Great. I think we're at the end of our cards, and we're at the networking break time. So thank you very much. We'll both be here through the panel and delighted to talk further. Thank you.
Rob Atkinson. I'm president of Information Technology and Innovation Foundation. So I want to welcome you along with Jennifer Simpson for this, I think, very interesting panel to discuss the issues in the Broadband Disabilities Plan. I'll introduce everyone. I'll make just a couple of minutes of remarks. Jennifer will make a couple of minutes of remarks. We will go down the line in order we have here. We have 5 minutes, so if you want to actually give back some of your time, we can have, that's always good, so if you want to be under 5, but we will hold you to 5 minutes, and then that should give us a few minutes for dialogue among the panel. I also should add, Dale asked me to add, there's an inductive loop system for the hearing impaired that's available in this space. So let me go down the list. First, we start with Eric Bridges, who's Director of Advocacy and Governmental Affairs for the American Council of the Blind. Next is Vince Cerf, who's Vice President and Chief Internet Evangelist for Google. Rosalind Crawford, who's the Director, Law and Advocacy Center of the National Association of the Deaf. Susan Fox was going to join us but could not today. I don't see Larry. Pardon me? Jason. Sorry, yeah, I don't see Larry either. Jason Goldman is Counsel for Telecommunications and E-Commerce, Environment, Technology, and Regulatory Affairs Division of the U.S. Chamber of Commerce. Link Hoeing, who's Assistant Vice President of Internet and Technology Issues at Verizon. Leah Katz, I can't see people, so I'm hoping that I'm getting this right. Leah Katz Hernandez is a student at Gallaudet University. And Fernando LaGuardia at VP of Time Warner Cable. Alex LeBrois, who's Executive Director, G3 ICT. Susan Palmer Masri, who's Director of Public Policy at AT&T. Ari Neiman, President of the Autistic Self-Advocacy Network. Laura Ruby, who's Director of Accessibility Policy and Standards for Trustworthy Computing at Microsoft. Ken Siletz, who's the Director of Global Policy for the Information Technology Industry Council. Missing anybody? Kate Seelman, Associate Dean, Professor of Rehabilitation Science and Technology, School of Health and Rehabilitation Sciences at University of Pittsburgh. And finally, Greg Vanderheiden, Director, Trace R&D Center at the University of Wisconsin-Madison. Did I miss anyone? Okay, great. I just want to give a quick commercial for those of you who just simply cannot live a day without hearing about the broadband plan, and I know there are many of us who have that affliction. We're doing an event tomorrow morning on the National Broadband Plan at ITIF with Blair Levin and the national purpose, and the reason I mention that is a lot of the issues this morning that came up were about these national purposes, education, healthcare, et cetera. It's also interesting that today, starting Monday, is the 25th anniversary of the first .com domain name, and it's also the 25th anniversary of the first issue of the first release of Windows, Microsoft Windows. So you think about how far we've come in 25 years with an amazing array of innovations. Certainly there have been innovations in the space for disabilities, but one could make a compelling case that we have lagged behind in that part of the ICT ecosystem, and that's why I'm so impressed with what the FCC has done under the leadership of Blair for the broadband plan and the disabilities part of it. I'm also particularly impressed with the focus on innovation. As we heard this morning, there's a number of components of the plan that really try to drive innovation in this space so that we can get better technologies for a wide array of different needs the disabled community has. That includes the Innovation Fund, Innovation Awards, the Innovation Forum. So I'm really hopeful that perhaps in 5 years we will be in a much better place than where we are today. Lastly, I'll just make a quick point. Certainly, not everybody on the panel, actually, I assume none of us have seen the plan. We've heard about it, and we certainly heard about it this morning. So we will ask the panel to talk about one or two things that they find sort of most compelling and interesting and promising about the plan. And I hope we can sort of focus on that, because clearly there are things in the plan that not everyone will agree with every component of it. But I think there's a lot in this plan that we all can agree with, and hopefully if we all get behind those, we can make real progress in this space. So with that, let me turn it over for a few minutes remarks from Jennifer.
Thank you very much, Rob. I'm Jennifer Simpson, the Senior Director for Government Affairs at the American Association of People with Disabilities, and we were very happy to co-sponsor this event. We think it's an exciting event, a milestone in accessibility history, in fact. And I want to also point out that this year is the 20th anniversary of the signing of the Americans with Disabilities Act, and it's only fitting and proper that the National Broadband Plan does have in it an incredible set of accessibility recommendations and provisions. So I think that reflects the hard work of our community. AAPD, as you know, our mission is to organize the disability community, and one of the things we have done is to work with and help create and found the Coalition of Organizations for Accessible Technology, and I see lots of our members are here, and I think it's the work of our coalition that has in fact helped make this broadband plan a plan that is inclusive, that does include people with disabilities, and does reflect the intents and purposes of the Americans with Disabilities Act. So I'm really thrilled that we're here having this forum, that we have so many honored speakers here. I know personally that many of these speakers have worked on disability, accessibility issues in their fields for a long time, have made commitments personally, and so this is very exciting. My question to the panel, I hope that they also reflect this in what they have to say, is the startling statistic that came out from the FCC's report on broadband adoption said that 39% of non-adopters were people with disabilities. So I think it would be very critical to think about in the next 20 years, when we celebrate the 40th anniversary of the ADA, what each of us have done to make sure that that number is down to 0%. So I'm asking the panel to think about that a little bit in terms of the reaction that they have to the plan, what their company or organization might be doing going forward to get that 39% down to 0%, so that when we celebrate the ADA 20 years from now, actually it'll be the 40th anniversary, we'll be able to say, I don't need a job anymore, because I'm an advocate, and that's what we do. So thank you very much, panel. Eric, I believe you're up first. Please go.
Let me, Jeremy, just make 2 quick points. One is I'm told by the magic of this thing called the Internet that Larry Goldberg will be joining us via Skype. So Larry, I think, is with us now. Larry is the Director of Media Access at WGBH Boston. Second thing, I have to apologize. I'm going to have to leave just a few minutes early. Just want to make people aware of that. So Eric, sorry for the interruption.
Sure. Well, good morning. I was pleased to be invited to talk about the broadband plan with you all. Some of my reactions to what has been said this morning. I have to say I feel really energized after all of the remarks from Chairman Janikowski to Kareem Dale to Joel and Elizabeth earlier this morning. The American Council of the Blind is a founding member of the Coalition of Organizations for Accessible Technology and a proud founding member. So my organization has an intense interest in the 21st Century Communications and Video Accessibility Act and some of the recommendations that have been made regarding several of its provisions within the broadband plan. One of which was, I can't help but say I was really happy and yet surprised to hear about, asking the Department of Justice to look at the Title III applicability for commercial websites. This is a huge issue to our members and, frankly, to the broader blindness and visually impaired community. So I was very happy to hear about this. Access to broadband in the visually impaired community, blindness community, is access to knowledge. Knowledge is power. Sort of a different way of putting what Kareem Dale said this morning. But access to education, to continuing education, to employment opportunities, and to social media, which morphs into employment and education as well. All of this is extraordinarily important to not only me as an individual who's blind, but our members in ACB. Unfortunately, given the fast-paced nature of technology, many of us are being left behind. And while this morning I have to say I was very encouraged by the remarks of everybody who spoke, the facts are this, that far less of the population of individuals who are blind or visually impaired are adopters of broadband. And it ranges for a multitude of different reasons. What we want to see is equal access to that information, to the intellectual property, to books online. The individual sitting next to me, his organization, Google, has proposed a settlement whereby literally millions of books could be made available through a commercial setting. ACB is very appreciative and grateful for organizations such as Bookshare and Recording for the Blind and Dyslexic for all that they've been able to do over the last many years. But having access to literally millions of books that we may not have had access to before in a commercial environment, gaining access to it in the way that you all who are sighted can access it to, would be huge for our community. Huge for an education, employment, and also entertainment purpose. There is a lot to be done. Access to mobile broadband. We greatly appreciate the efforts of Apple with the 3GS iPhone and its accessibility that was built in. Part of what we are seeking to do through Congressman Markey's bill is to drive consumer choice so that the blindness community is not limited to just one option.
Eric, you have 1 minute.
With that, I guess I will end my remarks here and look forward to taking questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Ben?
Thank you very much, and thank you, Eric, for that plug for the Google Book Search effort. We really do care a lot about this. Our motto says we are interested in organizing the world's information and making it accessible and useful, and we're really serious about the accessible side of it. I wanted to just touch on a few points and then relinquish whatever time I may not have used to Q&A. First of all, the U.S. penetration of Internet is only 74%. So that means that 25% of the population is not apparently online for a variety of different reasons. So as you're pressing for 0% non-access or 100% access for people with needs who need special access, you may need to figure out how to solve the problem for everybody else too. There's something that's not allowing a quarter of our population to get online at all at either broadband or any other speeds. Second point that I wanted to make is that we're, as you know, working very hard to improve our ability to make things accessible. So the automatic captioning on YouTube is an example of that. It's a consequence of the quality of our ability to do speech understanding. And that same quality has permitted us to do voice interaction with the content of the Internet. Eric said something interesting. He used a famous quote, "Information is power." I want to arm wrestle with Eric a little bit on this and say that it's not information that's power, it's information sharing that's power. Whenever you think about the consequences of information being made available to others, it's pretty astonishing to see what people can do if they have access to content. The other thing I wanted to mention is that high speed is very valuable for a variety of different applications where low latency is important. This is the case for signing, it's the case for collaborative work, it's the case for video conferencing and the like. So broadband can enable things that lower speeds simply don't accomplish. Along the lines of enabling, I'd like to make a very strong argument for what I'll call open platforms. An open platform, for example, open source code or a platform with an open standard application programming interface, enables others to make use of those systems and to bring new ideas to them. One of the reasons we released the open source Android operating system is to encourage others to develop new applications for mobiles. The same thing can be said for our Chrome browser, and it will be true of our Chrome operating system. It's true of Google Earth, it's true of Google Maps. All of our applications take advantage of open access to allow others to contribute their information and to invent new applications. And it's my belief that that theme is important for accessibility. Let's let people with good ideas apply them in all the various ways in which the Internet could be made available. There are lots of other things that I could say, but I'm going to stop, leave a minute and a half for some Q&A and turn this over to Rosalind.
want to thank you for the opportunity to let me speak this morning. Thank you, and don't worry, the rest of my comments, I will use my voice and not sign for the interpreters.
Thank you very much. I wanted to first echo something that was said this morning relayed by Chairman Janikowski, and that was the commenter on the broadband.gov blog. This is a big deal. And what we learned this morning is just tremendous. It's so exciting. I heard a number of times mention about H.R. 3101, the bill presented by Representative Markey, the 21st Century Communications and Video Accessibility Act. To the extent that the FCC has now acknowledged publicly the need for a lot of what is in that bill, I think it is incumbent upon us to ensure that the bill passes and to ensure that the FCC has the authority that it needs to ensure access to the internet and broadband for everyone. We are thrilled with this kind of support and acknowledgement of this need. I also wanted to talk a little bit and address Jennifer's question earlier about, how do we make sure that people in our communities actually reach the level of adoption that we want them to reach. We have been advocating for a long time, a very long time, for broadband that is available, affordable, and accessible. And with these three factors in place, we believe that we will ultimately achieve the goal of adoption. So we need to address all three of these factors in order to reach our goal. We expect, too, that to the extent that we can, the National Association of the Deaf, as well as our sister organizations, will be involved in every aspect of outreach, education, and training to reach the targeted populations that have not so yet adopted broadband, to make sure that they have accessible digital learning opportunities, that they can have not only just accessible materials, but personnel who are specifically trained and have the knowledge to understand and reach our communities and deliver this message to them in a way that actually reaches them effectively. We're absolutely thrilled with some of the provisions mentioned today. We hope that all of these provisions are actually in the broadband and not just in the working paper related to making the federal government really indeed a model for accessibility. This is critical. We also are looking forward to working with the Commission and with others to update regulations, not only for Section 255, but hearing aid compatibility. We are, again, and I'll concur with my colleague Eric, Department of Justice does need to take action to ensure that the ADA applies to all commercial websites, and the formation of the forum, the Consumer Industry Accessibility and Innovation Forum, cloud computing, making software available, making sure that all of the industry as well participates in designing accessibility features from the get-go and not leaving it as a last-minute thought, an afterthought, and having to retrofit. It just makes a whole lot of sense to have universal design become the norm rather than something that's delivered in the next generation. We always seem to be waiting for the next generation, and we think that that generation is here today. So I'll reserve the last minute of my comments and really look forward to questions and answers.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks for having me here today. I really appreciate being here. The Chairman Janikowski was right. Broadband allows people to dream big. Broadband has the ability to transform all sectors of the American economy, from healthcare to education, to participation in civic activities, to entertainment, to obviously e-commerce. With a broadband connection, everyone, no matter what your situation, no matter where you're located, or anything else, you have the ability to market your services, your products to everywhere in the United States, to everywhere in the world. And that's one of the reasons the Chamber of Commerce, the U.S. Chamber of Commerce, is so involved in broadband, because it really impacts every sector of the U.S. economy. Just a few stats I thought were interesting. Connected Nation talked about how 3.9 million adults with disabilities would join the labor force if allowed to telework. And telework requires broadband. And if allowed to telework, $166 billion in new earnings could be realized by these individuals. And again, it's the empowerment. It's talking about the ability to earn, and that's what really broadband does. And the Chamber itself is pleased that the broadband plan seems to be focusing on unserved areas as well as adoption. We've all heard that adoption is critical for these issues, whether it's relevancy, affordability. We need to get broadband adoption, increase broadband adoption, even where areas where broadband is available. I think it's important to acknowledge and praise industry efforts where they're working with the disability community. Mr. Dale from the White House demonstrated some of the incredible technologies and innovative products that are already out there. And between what Google's doing, what Disney's doing, what Verizon's doing, other companies that are represented on the panel, and Microsoft, and also members of the Chamber, there's a lot of great products. And I'll put in a little plug. The Chamber has a new paper out, The Impact on Broadband with People with Disabilities, and it really describes some of the tools and impact that broadband has on people, and it's a good paper for people who are interested in the issue. We think policymakers should encourage the development of innovative and assistive products and services. We don't want to see that innovation stifled. Again, just regarding what was announced today, government websites, making them accessible to people with disabilities. That's a great start. Making the government as a model for what can be done for people with disabilities is a great thing. I think that looking at government programs that are currently aimed at people with disabilities and making those programs eligible, or assistive technologies eligible under those programs would be good, whether it's Medicare, whether it's any other government subsidies that are currently available, reforming that. And I think the Access and Innovation Forum, putting together consumers with industry, with associations, with the government, and trying to solve these things, as a community, is obviously a very worthwhile goal. And with that, I'll turn it over to Link.
Actually, before you go, Link, I missed Larry Goldberg now is going to join us via Skype, so if that works, Larry. We can see you.
Hello there, this is Larry. I hope you all can hear me.
We can.
And can you hear me?
Yes. Yes.
I'm going to be on a significant delay here, so I'm going to try to turn off my own audio, or else I'll be hearing myself very late. Well, thank you all for enabling me to participate today by the miracle of broadband. Not only do I get to save the cost of a very expensive plane ticket, but I do get to sit at my desk and do my email while watching and listening to all of you. And of course, many of you are good friends, so I'm sorry I don't get to see you there today. Just adjust my headset here. As we've heard many times today, one of the barriers to widespread adoption of high-speed broadband is certainly cost, and perhaps even more so for people with disabilities. But another major reason and barrier that we've heard for the lack of adoption is a lack of a compelling reason to take the leap to broadband. And for many, the most compelling reason for adoption is the availability of high-quality video and audio on the web. So let me take a minute to tell you where I'm Skyping from today. I'm at WGBH, TV and radio broadcaster in Boston. You all remember broadcasting, right? Broadcasting over the air, free stuff? Well, I'll assure you that WGBH has no intention of becoming obsolete because our viewers and listeners are wanting to enjoy our content on their own schedules, on their own time, on their own platforms of choice. So we are online with a significant portion of our radio and TV programs. WGBH is also a champion of and provider of media access services. That means closed captioning and video description. And we also expect pervasive captioning and description online. And we're already seeing the fruits of these efforts in many ways, what Chairman Janikowski mentioned, with the providers who are providing captioning online. Let's not forget that PBS was the first to do that and is putting significant amount of caption programming online. Clearly, without pervasive accessibility, which is of a key driver of broadband adoption, that is audio and video, people with disabilities will remain part of that non-adopter segment of our population for a long time. So I think that what others have already mentioned in terms of captioning and description, what Eric and Rosalind and many others will talk about today, is to make sure that not only does captioning and description remain available online, but that we will also be seeing high-quality captioning and description. And, you know, in our new technology developments, we've often seen the quality of service and quality of experience fall on the wayside. As we got great music recording and playback in our homes, we found that portability was a highly desired service, so we found ourselves with highly compressed, not high-quality audio. Portability of telephony has given us cellular phone technology which doesn't match the quality of landline, even though the latter is being quickly phased out. Likewise, no one could possibly enjoy watching video via a dial-up connection. So we welcome the online video experience that broadband gives us. As the FCC knows, caption quality on broadcast cable and satellite TV is a top concern of deaf and hard of hearing people. And there's even a pending report and order on that issue at the FCC. So I hope that we can avoid a race to the bottom in the quality of broadband accessibility as we finally get our accessible online media that we've been waiting for. And finally, let me just say that as the FCC begins to roll out the activities they want to do on these areas, that a digital literacy training opportunity for users is matched by an accessibility of digital technology training for the carriers and the content providers. So we'd like to see more of that. And as these forums travel the country to the Centers of Innovation, I'll issue an unofficial invitation to come to WGBH and our beautiful new studios and hold one of your forums right here. We'd love to host you all. So thanks for your time, and I'll be watching and doing my email. Take care.
Thank you, Larry. Link? Well, I'm sure that what I'm going to say is going to be so stimulating that Larry will stop doing his email. Thanks for those comments, Larry. The good friend of mine, John Horgan, at the FCC just released a report, which I hope you've all read, called Broadband Adoption and Use in America. And it's got some very interesting statistics about a number of audiences, including those with disabilities and how they use information. For example, even those with broadband connections who are disabled do far fewer things online than people without disabilities, suggesting that services may not be well adapted to the needs of people with disabilities, or the devices used to connect are not well configured to meet their needs. Those who have disabilities in the survey were older than most. And that is also to be expected, since as we age, we tend to have more disabilities with time going on. Older people are also generally less likely to be online for a variety of reasons, including less familiarity with the technology and lower income levels generally than other people in the population. So what does this mean for the national broadband policy? First, while we have challenges in connecting more people with disabilities to broadband, the transition of information technologies and communications technologies to digital open protocols, always on, and higher capacity broadband technologies, and most importantly to me, mobility, has increased dramatically the adaptability and impact of broadband for people with disabilities. One personal example. Early in my career, I worked closely with a number of advocates for the hearing impaired. At the time, either relay services or TTY devices were the only way to communicate with people with hearing impairments. And these technologies were not widely used by those without disabilities, so they could reach very few people. When broadband networks began to reach the mass market and more people were connected with always-on communications, instant messaging, which had largely been for geeks and technology-focused, began to become a staple for the hearing impaired. In many ways, it became the phone system for the hearing impaired, and they could reach many people who they could never have connected with in the past. So I'm encouraged because of the build-out of more broadband and more adoption. And I think that's a really important focus in the broadband plan that I've seen so far from the FCC, and it's commendable. The plan is focused on these objectives, and adoption programs in particular are, to me, critical in improving the access for those with disabilities. Second, more capacity means more capability for people with disabilities. While video can be carried over 2 or 3 meg networks, upstream capabilities are often far lower. I've seen hearing impaired people use high-capacity, two-way video systems to communicate, and many experience for the first time in their lives what it can mean to communicate with others in a way they know best, through signing. More capacity coupled with mobile networks means people with all kinds of disabilities, especially those who use wheelchairs, can connect more effectively and more capably. Efforts to increase the availability of more spectrum, which is also a key focus of the National Broadband Plan, will help a lot to get the deployment of 4G mobile technologies out to more people more quickly. The focus in the National Broadband Plan in making more spectrum available will help improve the reach and availability of broadband for people with disabilities of all kinds, and that this could be especially true in rural areas. Third, we believe that the openness of the Internet and the broadband policies we have in place that have worked for the last few years has spurred the growth of what we call the Internet ecosystem. Companies at all levels of the Internet, broadband providers, applications developers, content providers, are free to collaborate, compete, and innovate, often combining technologies in new ways that we never would have expected before. Verizon, for example, has worked with device makers to come up with specialized text reader-enabled mobile phones and the first mobile screen reader to support the Internet. We believe innovation often happens in unexpected ways, and ensuring policies that allow this collaboration to continue is critical. Finally, Verizon recognizes that a broadband internet connection alone, one company alone, cannot expect to ensure accessibility for all the services offered over its network. Instead, application providers, website operators, equipment manufacturers, technical standards organizations, and others have to work together. That's why we have worked very closely with Congressman Markey and others and a host of advocates on H.R. 3101. It's already been mentioned today, and we think it's critical. It is not a magic bullet that will solve all accessibility problems, but it would address some of the most pressing needs of broadband customers with disabilities and lay the groundwork for more detailed efforts. For example, the bill addresses some of the uncertainty surrounding the application of universal service funding to broadband by explicitly designating income-eligible people with disabilities as a distinct group eligible for Lifeline and link-up universal support in connection with Internet access and other advanced services. This is an issue that's been pending with the Commission, and it was mentioned in the broadband report today, and I think it's commendable that it's included. The bill also recognizes it's not possible to ensure accessibility through adoption of one-size-fits-all solutions. The bill requires the Commission to engage manufacturers of computers and IP-enabled devices, application providers, and others to effectively respond to forward-looking accessibility challenges. And again, I heard a lot of good language on that in what's apparently going to be recommended in the report, and it's commendable. The technologies of today, based on IP, digitalization, mobility, and ever-increasing capacity, hold the promise of ever more integration into the world and society for many people with disabilities who have been sidelined in the past. And the National Broadband Plan, as it was outlined today that I heard, contains a number of provisions that can help boost connectivity for people with disabilities. We've long been active in this area and worked on H.R. 3101 for quite a long time, and we commend the FCC for a lot of the recommendations I heard described today, and believe that it will provide a groundwork for all of us to work together more effectively on a lot of these issues. Thanks very much.
Thank you. Leah?
Is the mic on, please? Thank you.
Test. Hello, my name is Leah Katz-Hernandez. And I'm here today representing, giving you a face, actually, of the community and the way that policy affects us in reality. I have some comments as well about the FCC's press release that was recently released on February 23rd, 2010, stating that 93 million Americans do not have high-speed internet access. Out of that statistic, only 42% of the disabled have broadband access. This digital divide means more than merely trailing others in technological terms. It means a lack of accessibility to the disabled. As a deaf person, my life depends heavily on broadband internet access. With broadband internet access, I do not feel disabled. But when I do not have high-speed internet, It throws me back to the days when deaf people had to depend on others. Deaf people now use video relay services, video phones, and such internet modes of video communications as Skype, iChat video, GChat video, and more. Like you just saw Larry on Skype. The deaf youth are at a unique place. We have grown up in a world that has progressed alongside technology. Discarding TTY in favor of video phones and video relay services, even though the TTY is still available in many places, it is considered largely obsolete. If the internet is not pushed to fast enough levels, communication services to the deaf that depend on broadband are frustrated. Communication is instant, easy to access, and crucial to my everyday life. I call my hearing dad on the video phone all the time. And I even had a phone interview for an internship through video relay service. For emergency calls, I feel safe in areas where I know I have access to video phones. Widespread broadband access is very important because from a disability viewpoint, we use high-speed internet heavily in order to reach out to the rest of the world. I'd like to point out a unique situation that deaf people face. I live in a house with deaf roommates. My family has 4 deaf members. Several of the major internet providers have caps on the amount of bandwidth that you can use. For my family, we have a house full of computers with webcams and other video communication devices. But if more than 2 people were to try to get online, it freezes, stutters, locks up, or presents a lot of video noise and artifacts. We need strong enough broadband to allow for multiple users to access video at the same time. This scenario is repeated out at many deaf houses across the nation. Finally, I'd like to respond to some of the comments that were made before by my esteemed colleagues here on the panel. H.R. 3101 is indeed a vital bill for us to pass. Knowledge is power, and that's certainly something we can all agree on. And the more the information is available on the web, the less of it has been accessible to deaf people. My hard of hearing college professor speaks of online seminars where there's a wealth of information being shared, but she cannot participate. So while broadband provides hearing people with 2 steps forward, for deaf people it is 1 step back. I would like to thank Google and Ken Herenstein's team for working to make captions for YouTube. It's a good first step. 42% of America's disabled population, that's a staggering number. Imagine how many of them are out there disenfranchised. The FCC has a good starting point in expanding broadband access. Broadband also needs to become more affordable to the economically disadvantaged. A more perfect union, as we say. Perhaps many people don't realize how deeply important technology is to deaf people, how much a part of our daily lives it is. However, it is a relationship that can be and should be perfected. Thank you.
Thank you. Fernando? Oh, go ahead.
Shall I go ahead?
Go ahead, sorry.
Okay. Hi, I'm Kate Seelman, University of Pittsburgh. As I sit next to my young colleague here, I think back 30 years when I was at Gallaudet, and we were working and asking the FCC to do hearing aid accessible telephones. So you skip forward 30 years, and here we are today, and Jennifer should feel very happy in thinking that we have come this far with those wonderful recommendations. Now I must rush on. My current perch is academic research and teaching and clinical service. I'm closely associated with Telerehabilitation Engineering Research Center and NSS Quality of Life Technology Center. I'm going to focus a little bit on the need for industry forums as well as the advancement of policy. In research and development, we just submitted a multi-million-dollar application to conduct global health research on the feasibility of using mobile technology for underserved people in the developing world, and we have a fixed mobile company in that application. We need to dialogue with industry to identify new approaches. For example, our remote job coaching for traumatic brain injury would benefit from collaboration with industry in order to capture what people with TBI are actually perceiving and experiencing. People with TBI do not routinely ask for help because they can't recognize that they need it. So we need to find ways of capturing their experience in order to develop the proper interventions, including technology to replace lost self-monitoring functional capability. We need partnering with industry to transfer into the market some of the products we're developing. Input from industry on strategies to moderate costs of individual broadband policies are very important, and the reliability of pervasiveness of service. Policy support and general service funds sensitivity to low-income disabled individuals for whom broadband is necessary. We have at the moment a multiple research project in which we have 50 subjects with spina bifida, TBI, and lymphedema. The cost of the broadband plan is prohibitive as it is now. And if the interventions from the research prove efficacious, then this broadband plan will either be transferred to our clients who can't afford it. Some patients and clients may only live at home if they can monitor vital signs. Monitoring is dependent on broadband availability. We've developed a personal mobility and manipulation appliance which is robotic and to support people with quadriplegia to perform fine motor tasks. If the broadband service is interrupted or unavailable, there is no remote assistance available, so that the robot greatly diminishes in its services. We in academia are experiencing the rewards of wonderful policy over the years. We have more students and faculty with disabilities coming in, and we have, for example, people with vision impairments and sensation impairments with diabetes, secondary, or rather retinopathy secondary to diabetes, and they can't examine their feet. They need some certain kinds of assistive technology that will help them to test whether their skin is breaking down, and we could certainly work with industry on something like this. We have blind and low vision clinicians who use remote broadband for wheeled mobility evaluations, and the screen readers are not sufficiently compatible. We have hard of hearing clinicians and clients that need hearing aids that are compatible with consumer electronics. So we're looking forward to working with you on into the future, and thank you very much for your recommendations.
Thank you, Professor Seelman. Thank you. Let me say at the outset, we welcome the Commission's announcement today of recommendations to fulfill Congress's vision that all Americans, including people with disabilities, share fully in the benefits of broadband. If accessibility equals independence, as Kareem Dale said, then it recalls Marcy Roth's words at the August Broadband Workshop, the impact of broadband access for a person with disability can be truly life-altering. Time Warner Cable's mission is to connect people with information, entertainment, and each other, and to give our customers control in ways that are simple and easy. To lead by example, we have to be inclusive. That means people with disabilities can't be an afterthought. They should have equal opportunity to benefit from all that broadband has to offer. And they should be equally able to say
that our services have made their lives simpler and easier. The broadband plan's recommendations come at an auspicious time for our company. We are nearly at the one-year anniversary of our complete separation from Time Warner. Having taken the past year to better communicate our mission, the broadband plan provides a unique opportunity for us to help focus on the importance of inclusion as a value that informs the way we run our business and develop our services going forward. This year, we will be prioritizing disability access on our corporate diversity council. Disability access will be a clear strategy focus for us. We will be working on finding more resources for current and new employees with disabilities and emphasizing inclusion of people with disabilities in the workplace environment. In doing so, we will build on many innovative programs we already have in place in our company that emphasize recruiting and training people with disabilities to join us as new employees. We recognize as well that as our offerings become more essential to connecting our customers to information, entertainment, and each other, we have a responsibility to ensure that those customers with disabilities are able to take full advantage of all we have to offer. So the broadband plan recommendations come at just the right time. The Commission staff have set forth an ambitious and important blueprint for meeting the needs of people with disabilities. We agree that government can be an important model for inclusive technology. We applaud the recommendations for collaborative problem solving. And recognizing that technology is moving very rapidly, as the Commission turns to updating its regulations, we agree the notices of inquiry addressing disability access and assistance will be a helpful first step in gathering information from all stakeholders. We also agree and want to emphasize that there is a key role for innovation in solving accessibility challenges, especially when inclusion is a part of planning from the beginning. We're proud to be part of an industry that has been at the forefront of bringing valuable innovation to American consumers, and we look forward to encouraging new ideas and forums for sharing best practices, encouraging more tinkering and research, and focusing on the role of innovation. In fact, our newly launched Time Warner Cable Research Program seeks proposals for research papers addressing new ways to meet the video programming needs of people with disabilities. And we look forward to being active participants in the Accessibility and Innovation Forum that will kick off in July. As the Commission proceeds, it will be important to ensure that accessibility and affordability barriers faced by people with disabilities are not exacerbated by legal, policy, and regulatory changes. Broadband has the potential to enhance the lives of all people, especially people with disabilities. We look forward to working collaboratively with all stakeholders to address the challenges set forth in the report and provide a more inclusive internet experience to our customers. Thank you.
Good morning. Thank you very much for inviting us to share our feedback on the plan we heard about this morning. As you may hear from my slight continental accent, I will give you a kind of a global perspective on what we heard this morning. And what I would like to say is that this plan is both very timely and extremely important for global markets and for persons with disabilities, industry, and the organization that represent persons with disabilities. Let me give you a quick background, very short. I know a lot of you are very much aware of the international developments on the rights of persons with disabilities. In 2006, the Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities was passed by the United Nations General Assembly, and since then, in a very, very short period of time, has been signed by 144 countries and ratified by 80. We were very pleased, ecstatic actually, to see that the first day when the White House website for persons with disabilities was open, one of the first commitments was to actually sign the convention which happened last August of 2008. So we were 2009, sorry. So we are very, very pleased with this development. Why is this important today in this context? The convention, for the first time in history, states that the right to access is a fundamental right for persons with disability in international law. It also says that accessibility is defined like access to the physical environment, to transportation, and to information and communications technologies. That means today that according to the convention and the laws that will be implemented in most countries around the world, it is as important as legally binding to have an accessible website as to have a ramp on a public building. So, in the context of this global transformation of the markets and the constraints and also the hopes for more accessible technologies, what does that mean? How does the plan works in that context? A couple of things which personally I found very, very encouraging. First of all is the fact that there is a lot of disposition contemplated in the plan to actually fund assistive technologies and make sure that there are appropriate subsidies to persons with disabilities to have access to broadband and access to technology. Furthermore, I think that the fact that the United States government is contemplating using Universal Service Fund to fund actually research or innovation for assistive technologies is the first step in a critically important direction for the long term. Because in fact, universal service obligation have been traditionally understood as trying to compensate for geographic disparities, rural areas versus urban areas and so on and so forth. But in fact, if you look at the universal service obligation, if you do actually sell a service for telecom that happens to be inaccessible to a certain category of population, like persons with disabilities, it is entirely justified to believe that the Universal Service Fund should be used to actually bridge that gap. Several countries have actually went in that direction already. Brazil, Thailand, Pakistan, a few other countries around the world, but in a very timid way. So the fact that the FCC here today says we will use the Universal Service Fund to actually help assistive technologies and persons with disabilities access to information is a critical global step for us as advocates for global accessibility. The other aspect I would like to mention is the fact that there was a lot of references this morning on public-private partnerships. I think it's critically important. Anything that can be effective today has to be multi-stakeholders, including persons with disabilities, industry, and the public sector. We go around the world. We are a multi-stakeholder initiative ourselves with disabled person organizations, industry participants such as Microsoft, IBM, or AT&T who are here today. And we try to actually generate those multi-stakeholders forums around the world with governments and different participants. And the result of that interaction is critical because the commitments between those three parties is what makes the movement start and actually be followed up. So I think the concept of those forums is extremely powerful, and I suppose that we will see a lot of good results from it. Finally, I would like to insist on one huge opportunity, which is that today, in order to lower the cost of technology for persons with disabilities, making the product accessible and assistive technologies accessible, it is extremely important to have a proper standardization. And standardization is not going to happen if you just take it at a national basis. It has to be globalized. So the same phone today is used in Africa, the US, or Japan. So if you want the manufacturers to actually lower their cost and have interoperability and actually universal solutions around the world, that standardization effort is critical. Several organizations do already a lot of work in that space. I think it's extremely important to push for global standardization of accessible technologies. So all in all, for us it's a big day, and I think we are very happy that the plan was announced the way it was this morning. Thank you.
Thank you. Before Susan goes, I know we had said we wouldn't take questions, but people are actually being very prompt, so we may be able to take some questions. So I've been asked to let people know who are watching online or listening online that if you'd like to Twitter your question, it is #BB plan, broadband plan, so #BB plan. So thank you. Susan?
AT&T would like to salute the FCC for doing a number of things in their broadband recommendations. The first is understanding that people with disabilities are throughout all walks of life. So it sounds as though the recommendations will cover broad initiatives around broadband because people with disabilities are everywhere, and also look at the very specific needs of people with disabilities in a systematic and concerted approach. We appreciate the collaborative approach. We believe that AT&T, in this day and age, we cannot have a single solution. It has to be a collaborative approach to find, with all the players involved, whether you're a service provider, an application provider, and government, business, people in the disability community. Access to broadband technology today is access to life. In some cases, it's literal, as Dr. Seelman pointed out. In many cases, it's access to economic independence. It's access to education. It's access to hope. So the work that's being done here today lays the foundation for us to fully participate in society as people with disabilities. We also believe at AT&T that innovation leads to accessibility through mindful design. And the innovation and accessibility approach, the combination that the FCC is recommending, we believe will lead to greater forms of access, not just to level the playing field, but to harness the opportunities that innovation provides today. And we're excited to have this opportunity to interact, as we have in the past, with stakeholders around these issues. Most of all, we would like to thank the willingness of the FCC to take in input from all parties. We know at AT&T, through our AT&T Advisory Panel on Access and Aging, that we've been able to do so much more because we've had that direct connection. We have folks, many of whom are in the audience today, like Claude Stout and Larry Goldberg and other people on the panel, who've provided us great advice. But we know that we need to work with other players as well. And so this collaboration and this tone is critically important. Finally, we applaud the FCC's encouragement of the government to take a role as a role model, a leader in providing accessibility and setting up forums and taking advantage of the expertise that's available through many of the agencies today. There are brilliant people in business, there are brilliant people in government, there are brilliant stakeholders in the community, and having the opportunity to get together, to look at common problems, to find new and innovative solutions will really set the trend for the future, and we appreciate the opportunity to participate in that as well.
Thank you. Listening this morning to my fellow panelists as well as to Commissioner Janikowski and Kareem Dale, one word jumped out at me. And it's interesting because that word wasn't actually knowledge or power or communication or even access. It was space. And I'll explain what I mean. When the Rehabilitation Act was passed, thanks to the efforts of disability rights pioneers like Ed Roberts and Judy Heumann, it was an affirmation that space, buildings that receive federal funds, organizations, universities, should be open to everybody. When the Americans with Disabilities Act was passed, it was a similar affirmation. It was, once again, expanding that idea of the space that we are committed to holding in these values of justice and equity and access. And now that we are engaging in this effort to also hold on those values of access and inclusion, the internet and the space provided by that, I think it's a very interesting reflection of how our society has come to see the internet as on a similar level of importance as any other place of public accommodation, and that we are stating that it is not simply voluntary, it is not simply a nice thing to do to be accessible. We are saying that it is the way you need to conduct business. And that's one of the things that jumps out at me at this broadband plan. The FCC is not simply saying, well, these are the things that you can do, or these are the things that we can tell you to do. It's saying this is what needs to be done, and we're going to work across government to see it happen. The other sense in which the word space jumps out at me is the role that broadband and online technologies have played for my community, the autistic community, and other disability communities, in not just providing new accessibility accessible route to an important aspect of commerce and communication and so on, but also in creating an opportunity to develop cultural space and to develop a community and to give people with similar disabilities and similar life experiences an opportunity to have that sense of community and to have that sense of culture. Knowledge is certainly power, but so is community. And one of the things that I think is so important about this, and is reflective of the fact that despite the fact that the data shows that people with disabilities have less access to the internet, it also shows that we benefit more from it when we do have access, is the role that online technologies can play, and particularly with broadband and high-speed internet, in creating that cultural space. I also want to add, when I was first approached about having the Autistic Self-Advocacy Network join the Coalition of Organizations for Accessible Technology, I saw it at first as something that, well, this is probably only going to look at access issues in a very narrow sense around the needs of sensory disability populations, but we'll join it because of cross-disability solidarity and so on. But what I discovered very quickly is that really these efforts are oriented around addressing the broad array of needs for people with disabilities, looking not only at things like captioning, which are very important for a wide variety of disability communities, but also at financial access. And I was very heartened to hear mention of interagency collaboration, including the Social Security Administration, and I think I heard, if not, I'd like to suggest Centers on Medicare and Medicaid Services and others to ensure that we're not just addressing the narrow scope of accessibility, but the broad understanding of it, and that we're also looking at things like digital literacy programs for people with intellectual disabilities, and looking at the various financial obstacles that often prevent people with disabilities of all kinds from having full access to this tremendous tool, to this really expansion of the space in our society. So I'm very excited. I look forward to continue working with the organizations and companies represented here and the FCC and entities across the federal government to ensure that once again that promise of equity, of access, and of inclusion is carried with us from our world and from our space into the world of cyberspace in the future.
Laura?
Thank you. Microsoft would like to thank the Silicon Flatiron Center, the FCC, ITIF, and AAPD for having us here today and for this great event. As broadband emerges as our underlying infrastructure, we think it's very important that the right incentives exist to ensure that new, innovative, accessible technology solutions are brought to market. And by making these recommendations in the broadband plan today, we think the FCC is taking a great step forward. While many topics were discussed today, I'd like to highlight a couple of the FCC recommendations that Microsoft is especially excited about. First is the biannual reports and further studies on how accessible technology is being used. We've been working on accessibility at Microsoft for over 20 years and have worked to integrate accessibility into our processes and products. And as we've done so, consumers with disabilities' expectations have risen, and they've asked for a lot of different things from us, and we've worked to meet those needs. But as we've worked to meet those needs, we've noticed that there's still a large population of people with disabilities who are underserved. As we heard about the recent report, people with disabilities are not necessarily using broadband or don't have access to it. And in 2003, in the early days at Microsoft, we commissioned a study with Forrester to try and better understand how people were using the assistive technology and accessible technology that was available at that time. And we found out that over 60% of working age adults could benefit from using accessible technology, but we're not aware of it. And that information really helped us shape some of our future products and look at how we were marketing accessibility and talking to people about accessibility. And in this light, we think that having the FCC pursue these biennial reports, looking at how people with disabilities currently use accessible technology, what their needs are, that will be really helpful to all of us, especially in industry. It will help us to make the right investments in future technology. So we're excited about that. And we hope the FCC will, as they shape the requirements for those studies, that you'll work with consumers and with industry to make sure that you understand the type of information that we're struggling to better understand, so that that information can be very meaningful when we do see the results of the studies. Another piece of the recommendations that we're very pleased with is the investments that the FCC is looking to make into the whole accessibility ecosystem. We're very encouraged that the FCC is looking at a variety of investments across the ecosystem, including pursuing dollars to help assistive technology and mainstream application vendors so that we can innovate in the area of accessibility. While some of us larger companies have the resources to do that, there are many small companies that don't. We know that the assistive technology vendors could definitely use some support in helping move their technologies forward so we don't leave people behind. And doing so will help all of us lower the cost of development for accessible assistive technologies, which will then lower the cost to consumers. We know there are numerous accessibility needs, and that the economics of meeting those needs can be challenging. So we think that having these additional resources and having them be applied across multiple frameworks will be really critical to ensuring that we meet all needs of people with disabilities. And whether the efforts are focused on creating accessibility in the cloud, in devices, in operating systems as gateways to the cloud, or in assistive technologies, we hope that the incentives and resources will result in a broad, comprehensive set of features so that people with disabilities will have the technology they need. We're very much in support of the FCC's partnering with the White House and executive branch to push forward Section 508. We believe that making government a model for accessibility is very important, and as industry we will continue to work with the FCC and the other agencies to ensure that the success of 508 continues. And then in closing, we wanted to thank the Commission, especially Elizabeth Lyle, for your leadership on the issue and your thoughtful, inclusive approach. As you look to update your regulations to fit modern technology, we hope that you'll carefully consider what has been accomplished by industry, that you will narrowly target technology-neutral policies, and that you will work closely with industry, consumers, and other stakeholders to ensure that the outcomes are meaningful. Thank you.
It's still morning. Good morning. My name is Ken Soletz, Information Technology Industry Council, or ITI. I have to start off with a phrase, jobs, 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 because our communication director said we should always reference jobs before we say anything else. So now I've checked that box. Appreciate the invite, the opportunity to be here. I very much appreciate the coffee and the pastries. That was a very nice addition. So whoever provided that, if it's the Commission, kudos. ITI, who are we? 46 companies now, I think, and I say that because every time our executive committee meets, we add new members. We have been adding new members despite the fact that we've raised our dues at least 12%, and some of the things that companies are doing are just mind-boggling, but we very much appreciate that they're coming to our table. We've been around 93 years now. I probably look it to many of you. And we have expanded into new business areas, including the opportunity of bringing in the brilliant Rob Atkinson to preside over the Information Technology Innovation Foundation, which is housed at ITI. And I must say that Rob sometimes holds 2, 3, maybe even 4 meetings a day, and meeting space is getting very limited. So now we have to book like a couple of years in advance just to be able to get the conference rooms. We have an accessibility committee that's now, I think, about 11 years old, so our commitment in this issue has been long-running. I say 11 years and counting because there are some new initiatives that will be undertaken by ITI very shortly that President CEO Dean Garfield will be taking to the board in a couple of weeks, and I'm very much looking forward to hearing the reaction of the board to some of those proposals that he'll be presenting. To the point, the broadband plan, Elizabeth, breathtaking in both its vertical and horizontal reach. She briefed me about a month ago about what was going to be in there. I have to say the FCC staff is highly influential because everything I was told is in there, so these are very important people we're dealing with here, and I appreciate that opportunity. I also perceive it as a full employment plan when you take this broadband plan along with the Access Board's advance notice of proposed rulemaking that is imminent. That's probably a fair word. I see David Backweiss in the room back here from the Access Board. Between this document and that document, ITI will be devouring it line by line, word by word, that it is truly a full employment opportunity here. It's going to keep us very, very busy for a long time. To a couple points within the initiative. The initiative by the Commission to help elevate the 508 uptake within the federal government via the Interagency Working Group. This is an excellent idea. If just contemplating the FCC and the Access Board partnering, cooperating, collaborating to drive this process, not only within the government but also in the marketplace, coupled with the forthcoming administration's initiative on 508 and the continuing ongoing engagement of consumers, industry, and other stakeholders, as one of my daughters would say, "Dad, this is huge." So I think this opportunity is excellent. We're bringing more resources to bear on a very critical issue, and everybody wins in that situation. Let me address the Innovation Forum. Again, another excellent idea, an excellent approach. In fact, the notion of some of the things that they've emphasized in this, we call the principles of 8, or the 8 principles. And those 8 principles include things such as communicate, collaborate, innovate, and cooperate. There aren't 8 of them yet because I haven't gone that far down my thesaurus or dictionary. But those are terms that industry responds to very readily and in some cases aggressively. That is really the way for us to build bridges because it enables us to bring what we have, resources, ideas, and even criticisms to the table and get the same back both from the government and from consumers. Between the 3 of those driving this process, we think that the opportunity here is immense. Some may say the risk is immense, and I would have to agree with that in some respect, but we'll manage risk to build on opportunity and, again, continue to grow this market for everybody. Gosh, I'm almost up with time. AT competitive funding, excellent idea. We need to really find a way to take government research dollars and to Kate's point, be able to convert that into something that's real and tangible in the marketplace. So something that's not just helping people become skilled grant writers, but actually delivering that technology to make a difference. ITI is going to be launching an initiative to really focus on industry best practices to highlight that, not only of the folks that make the technology, but the businesses that use that technology to deliver those services to you. We hope that this effort, which dovetails nicely with the FCC's effort on Innovation Forum, Axel's work with G3ICT and some other organizations will really help to raise the game within industry and again, create market opportunities for everybody. Thank you. That's a fast 5 minutes.
Thank you. First, I would like to commend the FCC both on the spectrum of specific actions outlined and for building accessibility in throughout the broadband plan. Now, most have commented on specific provisions, and so as the last person on the panel, I always have so many of the things taken out. So I'm going to focus my comments more systematically. This is a big problem. We're talking about a lot of people. You don't have to examine this very deeply to quickly conclude that you can't solve this problem by doing something special. The only way to address it is to systematically build accessibility directly into the way we design our technologies, our systems, and our services. And to do this, we need to find a way that works for all parties. When we look at creating a new system, we always look at two driving forces. One's called WIFM, and the other one's called WHAM. And WIFM is what's in it for me. And so when this broadband plan comes out, everybody is either looking at it as to, okay, what's in here for me, what is going to advance my particular approach, or they're looking at it as WHAM, which is what's in it against me, or what is it that this thing calls on me to have to do. And we need to often things start to break down that way. We begin trying to figure out, well, I need this and they're going to give it to me. And what we need to do instead, and I think that the broadband plan does this, is to begin looking at solutions that work for all parties. They work for consumers, they work for mainstream vendors and service providers, they work for assistive technology vendors, they work for schools and libraries that we depend on for providing the technologies. We need to not just lean on these groups to provide more accessibility, but we need to listen to them, we need to work with them, and we need to figure out how to help them do their part, and not just better, but also more affordably. And not just more affordably for us, but more affordably for them. And I see that type of thinking throughout the plan, and I applaud it. The plan also looks at new technologies and is bringing together people and programs to look at these and how they can allow better access to more people in more affordable ways. And again, by more affordable, I mean not just to consumers, but to governments, but to companies, and to the people who are trying to create these tools. Now, network and cloud technologies can provide capabilities when combined with broadband that were not possible before. Now, I want to start off by saying there's a long list of things that we can't solve with network or with cloud technologies, all right? It's not the answer to everything, but it can provide some powerful new tools to address the problems that are faced by some of the groups that are most vulnerable and that are most hard and most unserved today. Elders who don't want any special technology. If we can use cloud computing to cause accessibility or to cause the things they sit down to just automatically be in a form that they can use them so that they don't have to have special technology, the standard ones appear in a form that they can use them. People with no resources to buy technology, and they have to go to public computing centers to get access. The public computing centers, they don't have the ability to stock all of the different types of technologies for all of the different types, degrees, and combinations of disability. They don't know how to do them, they can't afford them, and their IT staff are not able to even figure out how to maintain them, keep them up to date, etc. With cloud technologies, combined with the accessibility that's now being built into mainstream operating systems, we can use systems like a preference profile that a person would sit down and the computer would automatically adjust or bring in dynamically those technologies from the network that are needed for that individual, so that all of the people now who go places and try to use public facilities would be able to go to them and be able to find that they would be accessible without the libraries having to be experts in everything, because it isn't going to happen. People who are deaf-blind and need to have materials converted for them, we can use network services to convert basically anything, including the image of a page, into readable Braille technology that can work for them. In addition, mainstream technologies themselves are becoming much more flexible, and many more things are being built into them. And as we work on this problem, I'd like to draw our attention to a related problem, which I call the computerification of everything in our environment. How many of you would like to try to use the washing machine at your friend's house? Think about it. If you can't use your friend's washing machine, what are we designing washing machines like? And as we bring more and more computer access down to everything in our environment, we need to be thinking about how we can use these same strategies to make these things accessible. And as the computers and computer-like interfaces move into the products all around us, we need to be able to look at how the accessibility strategies can too. So once again, I want to commend the FCC on the scope and vision represented by this plan and for the collaborative model that they lay out for advancing it. Thank you.
Well, thank you. I want to thank all the panelists, and we have about half an hour left, and so I think we're going to turn to some questions. There's an unwritten rule in Washington that's been in place for at least 3 years that any broadband discussion has to have a question on net neutrality, and that it has to be the very first question. So I'm not going to violate that rule, so we actually have a question from the media, from Com Daily. And I think what I will do is I want to direct it perhaps first to our ISP network providers and then maybe Vint and some others. What positive or negative effects could net neutrality regulation have on your ability to serve broadband users? So I don't know. I'm sorry, disabled broadband users. Thank you. So I don't know, Link or Fernando or Susan.
I'm really disappointed that net neutrality became the first question. I really am. Because I spend most of my time
we want to
on
keep
that
this
issue.
entertaining, so.
Well, I actually referenced it in my comments, and I think that is that a lot of what the innovations that I see coming out of our industry are collaborative innovations. Businesses working together, new business models, new ways to approach technologies that we hadn't thought about before. And to some extent, what concerns me most about putting rules in this space, which the net neutrality regulations would be, is you are in some ways cabining off or cordoning off different kinds of business models, unintentionally, potentially. But I think that's the most concern to me, because innovation in this space is really defined a lot by people coming up with ideas, businesses talking together, entrepreneurs coming to the businesses. We have a consumer advisory board, for example, which has about 24 representatives, including members who represent disabled people, and we get a lot of ideas from them. And a lot of those things cross boundaries between different industry segments. And I think inadvertently would be the worst concern, the most concerning part to me is putting regulations in this space that would keep businesses from collaborating as effectively as they have to date.
Fernando?
So I'll try to be brief, but I've been thinking about this point relatedly, not in terms of net neutrality, but in terms of the language we use. I think, to me, words like infrastructure, broadband as bricks, language that refers to networks as essentially being static, are very disfavorable to innovation, to accessibility, and to progress. So I think we have to be very careful in general about the way we talk about the future. To build on what Link said, if we are deciding that not everybody can participate in innovating and meeting the challenges and the needs of people with disabilities, we're doing a disservice not just to people with disabilities, but to our greater community. So I think it's important, not just with respect to net neutrality, but I think more generally, but the way that we talk about all stakeholders. In the spirit of Dr. King, and it's very inspiring to be here under his gaze and also under this mural to think about the work of the civil rights movement. No matter when you come to the movement, you need to be welcomed and you need to be able to make a contribution. So let's think about the way in which all stakeholders can contribute to innovation, which is key to solving the needs of people with disabilities, and to Link's point, not cabin off industries, business models, and technologies and decide now who can and can't make contributions.
Vint, did you want to respond?
Yes, I would. Thank you. A couple of observations. First of all, the Internet has been a hotbed of innovation ever since the project began in the 1970s. And part of the reason for that is that it has been a very open platform. New businesses like Google couldn't have started were it not for the fact that two graduate students with no assets to speak of were able to put an application up on the Internet and make it accessible to anyone who was on the Internet anywhere in the world. So one important element of the debate about net neutrality is somehow maintaining this open aspect of the network. The term net neutrality has been wonderfully distorted over the last 4 years into whatever it is that you either like or don't like about the Internet. I would take raise very strong concerns about business practices on the network that led to very anti-competitive behaviors. The worry that some of us have is that there isn't a great deal of competition for broadband provision. At most, users have an opportunity to choose among two possible broadband providers. And often they don't even have that choice. They might have a choice of one, and in the rural parts of the country, sometimes a choice of none. So this is not a highly competitive environment. In the earlier days of Internet, where dial-up was the primary means of getting access to the network, there were 8,000 Internet service providers. But that collapsed very, very quickly to a much smaller number because broadband required physical equipment to be put in place, new equipment to be put in place. Now, I want to acknowledge that the ISPs, the major broadband ISPs, have in fact made an investment to put that broadband facility in place, and I'm not at all complaining about that. Our biggest concern at Google and among those who share our view is simply that the broadband providers might take advantage of their control over this broadband channel to prevent other people from providing competing applications on top of that carriage, on top of that broadband carriage. To the extent that the broadband providers keep the pipe openly accessible and don't use it for anti-competitive purposes, then we are in fact very much in agreement with them that innovation is going to be key. So I just hope that whatever legislation emerges keeps this very open aspect of the network in place.
Okay. Do you want to do a question?
Sure. Rob, I want to take a shot.
Go ahead, Jason, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think from the Chamber's perspective, our main concern with net neutrality is that, sort of effective investment. So regulatory uncertainty that might be caused by tying up sort of, engineering and network management decisions in court. I mean, a lot of disputes that are happening these days are being resolved without the, auspices of the FCC or Congress. They're just being dissolved between the companies who are having issues or between the organizations that are having issues. And so, the FCC's Broadband Task Force itself said that investment in broadband, ubiquitous broadband, can cost between $20 billion and $100 billion, or $350 billion. And I think we're just worried about sort of any sort of impediments to that investment. Thanks.
We have a question here on Twitter, which is what is being done to help the business sector in making their online content accessible? And maybe we can reframe that as what it should be also being done, subsidies, grants, agency involvement. And maybe I can frame that also in another way. It seems to me the question really is what is being done to enable applications and other things that businesses are going to use to provide content in a way that's easy for them to do it, as opposed to each individual business having to do something special. I know on our website, I'd love to do it, but I don't, what I want is a plug-in that just makes it easy for me to do these things. I don't know if anybody wants to address it. How are we thinking about making these technologies available, Greg, so that it's just easy for people to do this? So it's not a huge effort. It doesn't cost a lot of money. It doesn't take a lot of technical ability, because there are a lot of small sites out there that really should be doing this, but wouldn't be able to otherwise. Greg, did you want to comment?
Yeah, I think there's two things going on. One of them, you've seen it in the comments, is talked about a national public inclusive infrastructure that would make it easier for there to be common tools and common components that people can build. Too often, as you said, people are building the solutions over and over again, and we spend all of our time doing the same stuff instead of building on each other. And so that's one of the key parts. Another key part of the infrastructure is the ability to, when you find media, to be able to automatically pair it with any captions or descriptions from another source, or to allow other people to actually to source some of those materials that can be paired up. The other major part, however, is individual efforts. Google, for example, did just a wonderful tool where if you have a video, well, they have one where if you have the video, you send it up and it tries to do speech recognition on the video, and you get as much as speech recognition is today. But a subset that sometimes people overlook is that if you just sit down and transcribe the audio, the text, and then you send the video and the text up, it will automatically synchronize them and put them together. And anybody can sit down and have a secretary just, transcribe some audio, and there's places that do that on the net. So we have that. We have tools now for description. So more and more we're seeing some public available tools that are making this happen as well.
I wanted to go to Vint and then Axel and then Susan.
Just a couple of observations. The way the Google captioning system works at YouTube is that the captions are a distinct and separate digital stream, independent of the video. It's not bound to the video in the same way that the conventional closed captions are. The reason that that's an important difference is that it's possible to manipulate that captioning file independent of the video. So, for example, if you have the transcript, we will do the time synchronization as we do speech recognition, as Greg mentioned. On the other hand, if you have a video that has English language speech in it, we will not only do the speech recognition, but we will also generate a timing file so that you now have the timing and the text. Then you can go back and edit the mistakes that we make. My favorite one is the one that referred to sample, and we thought it said salmon, so everybody was going to get a free salmon with the product. That led to some confusion, I think. What is valuable, though, about making this distinction is that it's technically possible to do things like that in the Internet. And so the point that I'd like to specifically underscore here is that standards and open access to technologies and software will help enable a lot of the accessibility that we all want, because once those things are openly accessible, other people can add to them. And that's certainly very much a part of our view at Google.
Great. If I can ask people to sort of keep your comments to about 2 minutes, that was perfect. So we'll go Axel, Susan, Laura, and Link.
Yes, just would like to give a practical example to answer that question. For web accessibility, we have the World Wide Web Consortium and its Web Accessibility Initiative. They offer free of charge on the internet, on the web, on the website, all the guidelines and also the tools for developers to actually develop accessible websites. So it's not a matter of cost. It's out there, it's free, it's standardized, it's a very, very wide industry kind of consensus building process. And to respond to Vinsurf, this is a great example of where standards can be effective. Yet, very few organizations develop their websites following those guidelines. So you may wonder why. One of our observations is that very few engineering schools today that prepare programmers, developers, product designers to actually build product or services include curriculum on accessibility. One of our main suggestions here is to suggest that engineering schools, as a matter of principle, include in their curriculum for any kind of engineers accessibility or actually awareness of accessibility rules and design, so that these issues are taken from the root cause, which is the lack of awareness from product developers and designers from the start.
Susan.
I think it's critical that businesses like AT&T take a leadership role as we have around universal design and accessible design. I think adoption of standards is absolutely critical. We need to know what to build to. I think we also need to look at the short-term and long-term. While there may be long-term solutions available, we need to make sure that people with disabilities have the tools they need today. We offer a wide range of mobile handsets that are screen reader compatible. We offer handsets that have screen readers that are offered with the handset. This is critical to bridge the time until we can go online and find everything accessible through cloud and other opportunities. But it will take a concerted effort. It will take a concerted effort from government. It will take a concerted effort for governments, really, from companies like AT&T. It takes application developers and people with disabilities to work together to determine where we need to go and how best to get there, both short and long term.
Susan? I'm sorry, Laura.
I wanted to mention, I think one of the benefits and successes that's come out of Section 508, as we, industry, have worked with all the 508 coordinators and our colleagues at agencies, and as they've tried to work on making their content accessible, they've told us over and over again, it's very difficult to train everyone to do the right things. So one of the things we've been looking at Microsoft, we took that input very seriously, is how can we build more accessible by default into our development tools, so that when people are writing code, they get more accessibility by default. And then also, you'll start to see in some of our upcoming Office products that we're trying to bring that concept also to Word, SharePoint, and some of the tools that people use every day, so that they will have built-in accessibility checking and different reminders to make sure that the content they produce on a daily basis is accessible. So we're hoping that those of us in the software industry can also provide that kind of help.
I think then Link.
A couple of points here. One is that although I agree that making things more universal in terms of how the formats work and so forth can ease access, there also is a real important role for how companies can differentiate their products. So competition can be really helpful. And I'll give you two examples in our case. We worked really hard with some providers to come up with a text reader-enabled mobile phone and the first mobile screen reader to support the internet. And we think it's a good differentiator in the marketplace. Helps a lot to define our product set. And it's doing pretty well. And so we've been very pleased with that. The other thing I would mention in this space is that the other part of accessibility for these kinds of products, it has to do with the fact that when you come up with a new product, you can find ways to actually make it meet needs that you hadn't thought of before. So a good example is in text messaging. We used to sell our mobile services with voice first, and then you added text to it. So you had to have a voice product first and pay for that before you could get texting. Now we have text-only services that people who are disabled can use on a phone, and that's really been another product that's differentiated us and helped define a space in the market that's been helpful. So those are two examples where there may be differentiation, but we think what it does is drive others to try to mimic that or try to come up with products that meet it, which is a good thing, I think, for everybody.
Kate, I think you had a comment too.
I want to just go back quickly to one of Axel's points, universal design and getting capacity building. Traditionally in rehabilitation, we focused on mechanical, electrical, bioengineering, but in telerehabilitation, for example, we must bring in informatics and the field of informatics. And I think that whatever is going on here in Washington, we shouldn't separate what we're talking about today from health information technology, because they're doing the framework for managing health information and its exchange with consumers and everybody else. So it's a very important part of our endeavor.
Thank you. Larry Goldberg, I think you wanted to make a comment on this one too. Will you cue him up?
Thank you. I'm just muting myself here. Yeah, I just wanted to mention that a lot of the forward-looking I'm watching out for the delay here. So some of the forward-looking ideas that have been raised over the past couple of minutes somewhat ignore the fact that there's a very robust, large marketplace for accessibility tools. The standards on the W3C website are long since complete, both the version 1.0 and 2.0. Authoring tools are already widely available, as are web accessibility checking tools. So there's quite a bit of resources out there. Nothing is free necessarily, but nor is it free to put up a website. Certainly hiring a web developer who knows Ruby on Rails or some of the latest advanced web authoring tools is not free either. So I don't know that we should be hoping or expecting that accessibility comes for free. But there are a lot of organizations, my own and many others in the room, who can be helpful, who have the tools, and are ready to go with web accessibility right out of the box. Thanks.
Thank you. We have two more questions here from the audience, and one is, in fact, on the topic of health information technology. The inquirer mentions the new interim standards for health information technology issued by the U.S. Department of Health were absent of any accessibility provisions. and the comment is actually addressed to the American Council of the Blind. Do you have a comment on that, and do you plan to submit comments during this comment period? And I believe they're raising it here because clearly health information technology uses broadband, so they'd like to know what you think about that.
Well, to be blunt, yes, we will be commenting. We were rather discouraged to see that there was no mention of accessibility. And, frankly, this is an area where the blindness community has never really had true privacy in accessing documents. So we will most definitely be commenting. We have a task force set up to deal with healthcare-related issues, and we will be looking at this very closely. In fact, we've already started to.
Thank you. Did anybody else want to comment on that topic? Vint?
Well, as you probably know, Google has had an experiment with personal health care records for a while. I would say so far it's been an experience, a mixed bag so far. But we really are very interested in this whole question of accessibility of information. So, Eric, I assume whatever you do, you'll be very visible and public about it. I want to know what things you think should be incorporated into the IT framework to address your concerns. So I hope you'll be very open and visible.
Thank you. This is another one that came up from the audience here. This was addressed to Leah. The writer says, "Thank you for sharing so eloquently on how video relay services have made a difference in your and other deaf people's lives. The question is, do you feel that you have achieved functional equivalent access to telecommunications? And if not, what can the FCC do in terms of video relay service technology to close the gap?" Leah, did you want to have a comment on that?
Yes, I do definitely. I can answer this. Specifically with the VRS industry and video phones, they have made an unbelievable difference. I feel that I am now on an equal playing field, both for communication as well as in the economic way, because it's helping deaf individuals get jobs and communicate better. And again, I told you I had a phone interview for an internship through VRS. Without VRS, I would not have been able to do that. So it's putting us on an equal playing field. Honestly, one point to emphasize is it's important that the FCC recognize that there is basically we're a disadvantaged economic group of individuals, specifically deaf and hard of hearing individuals. Many are on SSI, SSDI, and so economically we're not on an equal playing field with everyone else and can't honestly afford broadband access, and so that is what we would need to be truly on that level playing field. Thank you for letting me answer.
Rosalind?
Thank you very much. There's a couple of other things that while video communication for people who communicate in sign language is just so wonderful, we still have some challenges ahead of us. We want to make video communication also available to people who are hard of hearing, who use visual cues and other visual information to assist in communication and understanding. In addition, we have challenges with respect to mobile communication, especially we need I think 4G plus high bandwidth, and we need that high bandwidth at home, as Leah mentioned, with multiple users in a single location. We need to ensure that in the rural areas too, where we're deploying broadband, that we include enough high bandwidth requirements in any deployment measure to make sure that video communication can still occur with the fluidity and the accuracy and the clarity that we actually need.
Thank you. We have one more question from the audience. I think this might be for you, Ari. It says, can you address the needs of the autistic community in relation to technology in the context of broadband?
That's an excellent
That's an excellent question. And I think, there are a couple of different angles on that. One of them is, I think chief amongst them is the issue of access and just basic access, because as we mentioned earlier, and, as I think I mentioned in more detail at the last event on this topic, broadband technology can play a tremendous role in improving quality of life and in affording access to a community for autistic people. And as a result of that, the kind of financial barriers that many of us face, our community is disproportionately faces unemployment and underemployment, is a tremendous issue. In addition to that, many of us have auditory processing issues, so captioning is also extremely relevant. And beyond that, I touched upon this very briefly in my comments. I think there hasn't been sufficient consideration to the fact that there could be a much broader percentage of the autistic community having access to the internet if we gave more consideration to the prospect of creating accessible digital literacy programs. And when I think about this in some ways analogous to sort of another area that's totally unrelated, which has been a recent recognition of the fact that people with intellectual and developmental disabilities also need access to sex education programs, which is an area sort of generally considered only for the general population, and it's, people don't think of people with intellectual and developmental disabilities in those contexts, just as people generally often do not think of people with intellectual and developmental disabilities in the context of broadband technology. But at the same time, that's a very important part of life, just like the internet is now also a very important part of life and, the way we live now. And there are particular things that need to be done in order to make, a sexuality and relationships education program fully accessible to people with intellectual and developmental disabilities. There's sort of a similar analogy in the fact that we could be, and this is again where I think collaboration with CMS could be very valuable, teaching digital literacy to a broader array of people with disabilities, even some with much more significant impairments than we traditionally think of when we talk about broadband access and people with disabilities. If we also start looking at it in the same sense that we think of other instrumental activities of daily living, like using a phone or other types of telecommunication technologies. So it's a very sort of brief listing of what could be a much longer conversation, but I really do thank you for asking the question, because I think our community isn't often thought about when talking about these issues.
Thank you, Ari. I think one more comment, Link, you had?
Rosalind, I wanted to comment on something Rosalind said, because I do really believe mobile technology is a very, very important part of this whole matrix. And I had a mother-in-law who lived with us the last 7 years of her life, and she was paralyzed on one side, and you could readily see how mobile technologies for her in a wheelchair were very important. But her point about the capacity of these networks is critical, and even though we were talking today about the recommendations on access, which I think are very important, another important part of the plan, I do believe, is other things like the inputs to the networks, and the spectrum issue is really important. We're beginning to build 4G technology, as Rosalind said. Now we're doing some tests of it right now. We've actually been able to achieve 50 megs down, and I think I've forgotten now what it was up. It was a lot up as well. That's not a loaded basis, so it might be closer to 5 to 12 eventually down and several megs up. But still, when you look at that compared to today's wireless networks, it's huge. And to her point about coverage, I also 100% agree. One of the things that's nice about some of the spectrum that we were able to get in the last auction is that it's very good in terms of replication out to rural areas. We're doing some tests on that too, and it could be possible that it might help in rural areas. We're not certain yet, but it could. So there's some real promise for these mobile technologies going forward.
Thank you. I've been told that we should wrap up real soon. Before we do, though, I just want to say a few things that I heard, which were just brilliant from the panel. Things like access to knowledge is power, information sharing is power. This is a big deal, this plan. Broadband transforms all areas of the economy. I mean, this is so cool. The transition to digital will always help people with disabilities if we are mindful of it. I want to thank Greg for his computerification of the ecosystem. I think this is so true, and if we're not there as people with disabilities, it's going to be a problem. Someone said, I don't feel disabled with broadband internet access. I think if that doesn't summarize what the whole point of the plan is, then we've missed it. Lots of people said other things. It's access to life. The internet is a space that is a place for all of us, particularly for people with disabilities. So, I want to thank our panel for raising the discussion to these high levels, and I think we should all thank them very much for this.
Well, I'd like to thank Rob and Jennifer also and all of our panelists. I thought that was really a great session. Joel, did you want to say a couple of words here as wrap up?
Yeah, I know we're at the end, so I'll just say a couple of words. I just want to thank again everybody who came today, thank this remarkable panel. We've taken a lot of notes, and there will be a lot more discussions to come. As you can tell, to use the phrase of the day, this is a very big deal for everybody and for the FCC. We are deeply committed to making this work, and we're deeply committed to moving forward in a collaborative way. So thank you, and much more to come. Thank you.
Before we end, I would like to add some thanks to some of the people here that were behind the scenes that you didn't see up here on the podium, and they include Roger Goldblatt, Lyle Isita, Kayla Hernandez Eula, Jeffrey Reardon, and Helen Chang and Leo Fitzpatrick of the FCC, Caleb C., Anna Nochesi, and Jamie Stewart of my staff out in Boulder, and of course Amiko Guti of ITIF here in Washington, and of course all the just wonderful people here at the Adaptive Center here at the DC Public Library. So thank you all for coming, and talk to you later.